Chapter 520. The fat demon that had appeared out of nowhere had easily rescued Ebenezer from certain death. Despite facing the most powerful attacks unleashed by 4 7th-tier beings, he appeared to be so relaxed and carefree. Clearly, he was more powerful than everyone else, and the spectating guests immediately became nervous again. Joshua had died a tragic death, and the adorable little elves had lost their closest kin. Thus, everyone was naturally siding with Blower and the others. However, such a powerful opponent had appeared, and the outcome of the battle had become uncertain. 8th tier? Who would have thought that the leader of this mercenary group would be so powerful? Meg was also a little surprised at the sight of the abyssal demon. This was also the first time that he had heard about mercenary groups hunting traveling elves. This also reminded him that he had to take Amy to and from school every day in the future. Even though Amy was a half-elf, there was no telling what those deranged bastards would do, so it was clearly necessary to take precautions. Furthermore, the enemy was clearly very powerful. The main force consisted of 5th-tier and 5th-tier demon orcs, 7th-tier demons, and even their leader, who was at least 8th tier. Grim expressions also appeared on Blower and Sally's faces. From the attacks that had just been unleashed, this guy was at least at the 8th tier. An 8th-tier abyssal demon in conjunction with a 7th-tier porcupine battle boar and a 6-armed snake demon. Even if they had 4 7th-tier beings on their side, they still wouldn't necessarily be a match for them. However, Blower and Sally didn't appear to be backing down in the slightest. There were still many of their brethren waiting for them to rescue, and their hands were stained with the blood of countless elves. Countless tragedies had been caused by them. Seeing as they knew about this, they definitely couldn't feign ignorance. Even if they had to fight to the death, they had to at least live with dignity. Did you say the same thing to our brethren when you were trying to capture them? Blower glowered at Olaf with his fists clenched tightly, and his handsome features were extremely cold. Sally also pointed her bow at Olaf, but she didn't rush to attack. Since Olaf could catch her arrow with his bare hands, it meant that the arrow didn't do much damage to him, not to mention that he had a shield with him. Lulu's injuries recovered quickly under Cece's healing. After the World Tree was resurrected, Cece's healing ability had obviously become more powerful. Furthermore, the healing effect between the two of them was also enhanced. There was no need to worry about such injuries for now. However, when Lulu looked at the huge wild boar covered in triangular spikes, her expression became serious and dignified. In open areas, wild boars were even more difficult opponents to provoke than tigers. The huge impact of a wild boar's charge would cause great damage to anyone who was grazed by it. In contrast, porcupine battle boars were magic beast mounts bred by the abyssal race. They were extremely wild, and in their berserk state, they could unleash even more power than they were capable of. Even though this 7th-tier porcupine battle boar wasn't very intelligent, he still had to treat it with all his heart. What a big pig. Father, will we be able to roast it this time? Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at the porcupine battle boar with elation and anticipation on her little face. That might be a little difficult. Meg looked at the porcupine battle boar that was over 2 meters tall and over 5 meters long. It was as large as the front of a heavy truck, and he found it difficult to imagine how they were going to roast it. All right, but this pig looks the same as that Uncle Hedgehog's pig from last time, right? But this pig isn't as big as Uncle Hedgehog's pig. Amy was a little disappointed, but she quickly asked with a curious look on her face. That's right. Mag nodded slightly. During the previous negotiation between the dragons and the demons hosted by the City Lord's castle, there was an abyssal demon representative from the demons. When he came, he was riding a huge pig with spikes all over its body. But this pig and that porcupine uncle look like bad guys. If Big Sister Aisha and Cece can't beat him, then I'll have to take care of him, Amy murmured to herself as she looked at Olaf with her wand tightly clenched. That's right. I've heard the same thing from many elves, so I decided to try it out myself today. I found that it really doesn't feel good. Unfortunately, they don't have the ability to resist, so they either have to die or submit to me. However, I'm different. All of you want to kill me, but who can actually kill me? Olaf looked at Blower with a deranged smile, and his smile abruptly faded as he took a step forward. He looked at Blower and Sally with a cold expression and said, however, "You two seem to have heard something that you shouldn't have. Hence, you have two choices now. You can either die or submit to me." Everyone fell completely silent. After witnessing Olaf's immense power, no one dared to step forward for Blower and Sally. At the same time, they began to carefully search for the Grey Temple. In a situation like this, only the Grey Temple could prevent something like this from happening. However, no one could find any law enforcers from the Grey Temple, and they didn't know if they would be able to get here in time. Submit? I, Blower, have never thought about submitting to anyone, let alone a demon. Blower chuckled coldly as he raised his hands high above his head. He chanted in a loud voice, "Wandering with spirits, heed my call. Would demons, show yourselves." The trees in the Aiden Square immediately rustled as bursts of green light surged toward them. The bursts of green light then converged together to form a series of green giants that were over 4 meters tall. All of them held green staffs in their hands, and there were around a dozen of them. They surrounded Olaf and Sally. High-level water-type forbidden spell, extreme freeze. At some point, she had put away her longbow, and a wand had appeared in her hand. She pointed it toward Olaf and Ebenezer, and a gust of frosty wind blew past. A layer of white frost instantly appeared on the ground where Olaf and Ebenezer were standing. Ice then began to form from their legs upward, as if it were trying to seal them in ice. Lulu, who had almost fully recovered from her chest injury, also charged toward the porcupine battle boar. Her massive body flashed through the air as she approached the porcupine battle boar. "In that case, you can only die," Olaf murmured to himself. Olaf raised his hand, and a circle of blades that were around 1/2 meter in length appeared around his shield. He hurled the shield toward the treants, and the shield flew through the air, slicing through the treants' necks as if it were harvesting grass. The massive treants instantly exploded into green light, while the shield continued to fly toward Blower without slowing down in the slightest. Chapter 521. Crap! Blower's expression changed drastically at the sight of the black round shield hurtling toward him. A series of magic barriers appeared around his body, and he pointed his wand forward, upon which a green long sword materialized in midair before flying toward the round shield. The green long sword clashed with the black shield, and it was instantly shattered. The angle of the black shield's flight deviated slightly, and it crashed viciously into Blower's magic barrier. The magic barrier was instantly shattered, and even though the black shield's momentum had been significantly hampered, it still struck Blower's chest. Bam! A dull thump erupted, and Blower flew back 5 to 6 meters before crashing heavily into the entrance of Amy's restaurant. His chest caved in slightly, and he threw up a mouthful of blood as his face paled significantly. Anna turned to Blower with a concerned expression, and her sobbing abruptly ceased. At the same time, Olaf rushed toward Sally. With each and every one of his footsteps, the ground tremored violently, and he was like a rolling ball that was even more ferocious than the porcupine battle boar that was charging toward Lulu. Sally's expression was extremely calm as she waved her wand through the air, and 4 water dragons hurtled toward Olaf. At the same time, she leaped to the side, and her longbow appeared in her hand again. She knocked a rootless arrow onto her longbow and unleashed 5 arrows at once, all of which flew toward Olaf in 5 different directions. Oliver waved his hand, and the black round shield that had rolled to the side flew back and landed in his hand again. It was as if he was holding a big pancake. He casually slapped it forward, and the 4 water dragons were smashed into splashes. 3 of the 5 arrows were smashed to the ground, and the remaining 2 arrows were easily smashed to the ground after avoiding the round shield. They did not cause any damage to him at all. The rotund Olaf was even faster than the nimble Sally, and he caught up to her in the blink of an eye. He didn't use any techniques or movements, and his massive body crashed directly into Sally's body. It was as if she had been struck by a speeding truck, and Sally was instantly sent flying before also landing near the entrance of the restaurant. The stone slabs on the ground were shattered, and she threw up a mouthful of blood as she lay on the ground, unable to get up for a while. I'm actually a merchant, so I always respect the choices of my customers. I'm very sorry for your decision, but I'll still make it a reality for you. Olaf stowed away his round shield as he slowly made his way toward the entrance of the restaurant. He looked at Blower and Sally with a sharp smile on his face. All of the customers averted their gazes with fearful expressions upon seeing this. The terrifying power that Olaf had displayed was not something that they could oppose. Even though they were more inclined toward Blower and Sally, there was nothing that they could do to stop him. If you kill us, I'm sure you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Blower was still not fearful in the slightest as he chuckled coldly. Is that so? I've never regretted dying, let alone a piglet. Olaf's laughter became even sharper, as if he were about to do something very exciting. Sally glowered at Olaf with killing intent in her eyes. She had never wanted to kill someone as much as she did right now, but now she was going to die at his hands. With his vicious methods, countless elven beings who had traveled the Norland continent had perished at his hands in the past few years. Big Baddie, you're not allowed to bully Big Sister Aisha. Right at this moment, a mellow voice sounded with a hint of fury in it. Everyone immediately turned toward the entrance of the restaurant in unison. Amy stepped forward with a serious expression as she looked at Olaf. She raised her wand high into the air and yelled, "Wah, wishful wand, transform." Purple light flashed from the purple crystal on the wand, and a purple staff over 2 meters in length appeared in her hand. There was a fist-sized purple crystal ball on the staff, and purple golden light was shimmering within the crystal, creating an extremely dazzling sight to behold. Can a wand transform into a staff? Where can I find a wand like this? It's so cool. As expected, having 2 great magic casters as masters really is a different story. Just that wand alone is already something that other magic casters can't compare with. Will Amy become even more powerful after transforming her wand into a staff? All of the customers' eyes lit up at the sight of Amy's staff. At the same time, they were filled with curiosity and anticipation. Meg was also looking at Amy, and he was also looking forward to seeing how many times Amy would be able to trigger the Prophecy Stone's effects. Furthermore, he had already caught sight of Julian sitting on a deck chair in front of the magic potion shop, and he was struck by the feeling that he had complete control over the entire situation. A half-elf brat? She's quite adorable. If I take her to the black markets of Rodu or the Demon Islands, she should be able to fetch a good price. Olaf turned to Amy, and his eyes immediately lit up. He had killed someone in Chaos City today, so he couldn't stay in this area for too long. If he could take this little brat with him, then he would be able to earn some money. As for that little brat's wand, it was only a child's toy, so there was no need for him to worry about it. Boss, this little brat is at least a 4th-tier magic caster. We have to be careful. Ebenezer had suffered a little at the hands of Amy, and this little brat's appearance was simply too deceptive. Now that her wand had even become longer, he hurriedly issued a warning. 4th-tier magic caster? A hint of surprise appeared on Olaf's face. Was this little brat a prodigy? In that case, it was even more worth capturing her. Regardless of whether he could nurture her into an assassin or use her as a bargaining chip in his negotiations with the Wind Forest, she would be a good choice. Go. Ultimate Ice Fire Bomb. Amy looked at Olaf with a serious expression as she pointed her staff at him. Red and white light appeared in the Prophecy Stone at the same time, and a ball of ice and fire flew toward Olaf right in front of everyone's expectant eyes. All of the customers' eyes widened in unison. Sally and Blower also had expectant looks in their eyes. PFFF. Olaf raised his round black shield and slapped it against the ball of ice and fire. It was as if he were snuffing out a small flame, and the ball of ice and fire didn't even cause a single ripple. Everyone instantly fell silent. Peculiar expressions appeared on their faces as they looked on. It was indeed a little unrealistic to expect Amy to defeat this powerful abyssal demon, but they were still a little disappointed by the outcome. Chapter 522. Olaf was convulsing with laughter, and Ebenezer was also guffawing with glee. All of the customers were looking at Olaf with peculiar expressions. Some of the customers who were familiar with Amy couldn't help but cast their gazes toward the magic potion shop. This guy sure was brave. Is it that funny? A hoarse voice that sounded as if it had just emerged from hell sounded. The frosty aura emanating from the air was even colder than the glacial winds blowing from the Ungoro mountain ranges. Of course, old man. Is there a better joke than this? Ebenezer was on the verge of tears from his laughter as he turned to Urian, whose back was slightly hunched over. Master Julian is here. All of the customers' eyes lit up upon hearing this, and they heaved a collective sigh of relief. Seeing as he was here, Blower and Sally would be safe. At the same time, they turned to Olaf and Ebenezer with sympathetic expressions. They dared to bully Amy in front of Urian and even mocked her master. They were most likely courting death. Blower looked up at Julian. Even though he had seen this elderly man sitting at the very front of the line for the past few days and knew who he was still struck by a sense of awe and reverence toward a legendary magic caster like him. At the same time, he heaved an internal sigh of relief. Sally looked at Amy, and a warm feeling welled up in her heart. Little Amy was the first to step forward when she was in danger, and it was also because of her that Julian was here. Olaf's smile instantly stiffened. He could sense the sudden drop in temperature and the powerful magic aura emanating from the side, and he turned around stiffly to face Julian. His eyes widened as he took a couple of steps backward in horror. He lowered his head with reverence and said, "I didn't think that it would be Master Julian. These brats killed my brothers, and as their big brother, I have a responsibility to avenge them. Please forgive me if I've disturbed you, Master Julian." "You are Urian." Ebenezer's eyes immediately widened, and a look of horror appeared on his face. One terrifying legend after another surfaced in his mind. Regardless of whether it was the annihilation of the man-eating demons or the deaths of the legendary demons at his hands, all of them were evidence of his terrifying power and means of dealing with demons. "I don't find it funny at all." Julian shook his head. An icy blue chill shot out from beneath his feet like a bolt of lightning, instantly landing on Ebenezer's body. The huge body of the six-armed snake demon was frozen in an instant. Its face still maintained a frightened expression. Then, the ice shattered and turned into fragments that fell to the ground. "Wow." Olaf's expression changed drastically at the sight of Ebenezer's shattered body, and his eyes were filled with shock and horror. He had received news from his tribe that Julian was in Chaos City, and had warned them not to provoke him under any circumstances. Who would have thought that he would run into him today? However, he still forced himself to remain calm, and said, "This guy dared to speak rudely to you, Master. He deserves to die. He deserves to die. Your Excellency, please don't hold a grudge against me." "Little Amy, are you okay?" Urian paid no heed to Olaf's flattery and strode over to Amy as gently as he could as he asked, "I'm fine, Master Julian." Amy was initially feeling a little disappointed that her magic didn't work, but after seeing Julian easily freeze Ebenezer, her eyes lit up again. She pointed at Olaf with elation and said, "But he said that you and Master Crassus are pussies. He said that our soft magic won't be able to defeat this big baddie. Is that really true?" "Mas, Master, and Crassus." Olaf stared at Amy with incredulity in his eyes. He suddenly thought back to the letter he had received from his tribe a few days ago, which warned him not to provoke the disciples of Julian and Crassus. Furthermore, the letter also mentioned a restaurant. He hadn't paid much attention to it at the time, but now that he thought about it, that restaurant seemed to be called Mamie's, and the restaurant he was currently in was called Mamie's. Olaf suddenly felt a chill run down his spine when he recalled what he had just said. Compared to when Ebenezer had called him an old man, he already had a premonition of his fate. It was clearly impossible for him to escape from Julian. As for resisting, that would only be a faster path to death. I think the word pussy is quite apt to describe Crassus. A cold smile appeared on Urian's face as he slowly turned around to look at Olaf. His smile gradually turned cold as he said, "However, the magic you've learned isn't some weak little magic. Defeating a fat little pig like him should be no problem for you. Now, try the Ice Soul Lotus I taught you today." Urian raised a hand toward Olaf, and the black shield in Olaf's hand abruptly slipped out of his grasp, as if it had been struck by an unimaginable force. It was nailed to the ground before being covered in frost and ice. Master Julian, I bear no ill will toward you or your disciple. This is all a misunderstanding. Our abyssal race has always been very respectful toward you. Leader Warsey is my uncle, so I hope you can spare my life on his account. Olaf didn't attempt to pick up the shield on the ground. Instead, he turned to Julian with a fearful expression. He was filled with remorse for putting himself in such a dangerous situation for the sake of an old man. Urian turned to Olaf with a cold expression and said, "If I were you, I would be thinking about how I'm going to take that soft attack." "All right." Amy nodded with a serious expression as she looked at Olaf with a serious expression. She pointed her staff at Olaf with both hands and began to chant a string of unfamiliar incantations. Dazzling silver light began to converge within the purplish-golden ball at the tip of her staff. At the same time, the purplish-golden light within the oracle stone also began to surge violently. As a result, the light became even more dazzling, and the silver color became even more profound. Olaf was looking at Julian with a hint of wariness in his eyes, but he wasn't too concerned about Amy. He could easily withstand a fourth-tier magic caster's spell even with his bare hands. After all, Julian had only confiscated his black shield and hadn't restricted his power. All of the spectators were also thinking the same thing. The 4-year-old Amy was already able to unleash an intermediate spell, and that was already enough to shock the entire Norland continent. Julian was clearly overestimating Amy's abilities to take on an 8th-tier Olaf. Chapter 523. The Ice Soul Lotus was like the most intricate piece of art. Its transparent ice crystals shone with a dazzling silver light, and it instantly appeared above Olaf's head before silently blossoming. As the Ice Soul Lotus blossomed, countless threads of ice suddenly fell from a circular area with a diameter of around 2 meters, forcibly restricting Olaf's movements. The Ice Soul Lotus exploded at the same time, and its petals transformed into sharp blades that hurtled toward Olaf at the center of the circular area. Each and every one of the petals was shimmering with a frosty light, and there were dozens of them in total. How is this possible? Olaf's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. As a melee tank, he didn't have any magic barriers or anything like that around his body. However, the countless threads of ice that were descending from above were already making him feel as if his movements were being restricted. Furthermore, the ice blades that were shimmering with a frosty light posed an even greater threat to him than Blower and Sally. This was already beyond the scope of a 7th-tier spell, and it was at least very close to a spell unleashed by an 8th-tier magic caster. If he had his giant black shield, he would have absolute confidence in being able to block all of the ice blades. After all, defense was his forte. However, his black shield had been frozen by Julian, and his range of movement had been restricted as well. In the face of the countless ice blades, he could only evade and take them head-on with his bare hands. What powerful magic waves! How many times has the prophecy stone unleashed? Blower was also looking on with incredulity. He had thought that 4th-tier magic was the upper limit of Amy's power, but this spell that posed an absolute threat to him made her upper limit a mystery. The prophecy stone's activation is random, but it's still a potential threat and intimidation to her opponent. However, this can't be considered as Amy's true power, Meg thought to himself as he tried to maintain a clear head. The ice blades that were spinning at a frenzied pace were hurtling toward Olaf from all directions. Even though Olaf was quite stocky, his movements were extremely agile. He swept his hands through the air like a pair of fans, and all of the ice blades that came into contact with his hands were shattered into ice shards. However, there were simply too many ice blades, and no matter how fast Olaf was, he wasn't able to take care of all of them. One of the ice blades sliced into his back, puncturing his thick leather armor and sending a pillar of blood flying through the air. Almost at the exact same moment, one ice blade after another pierced through Olaf's armor, leaving behind a series of gashes of different depths. Some of the ice blades even exploded within his body, leaving behind a series of horrific wounds. In the blink of an eye, his entire body was drenched in blood. Thump. The ice blades disappeared, and a thick layer of ice appeared on the ground. Olaf, who was covered in blood, fell to his knees uncontrollably. Almost a layer of his flesh had been sliced off, and he supported himself with his hands as he looked at Amy, who was standing at the entrance of the restaurant. He still found it hard to believe that such a little girl could unleash such a terrifying spell and defeat him. Amy's. All of the customers couldn't believe their eyes upon seeing this. The powerful demon who had easily defeated Blower and Sally was now kneeling before Amy. Furthermore, Amy had done all of this on her own, not with the assistance of Urian. This world was simply insane. So awesome. Even Amy herself was in disbelief upon seeing this. She faltered momentarily before turning to Olaf with a serious expression and said, "Do you see how powerful I am now, Big Baddie? Amy, am super fierce." After a moment of silence, a burst of laughter broke out. This was an outcome that no one present had expected. However, it seemed to be the best result after so many people had died. "Grandpa!" Anna threw herself onto Joshua's chest again, sobbing with grief and despair. "The Grey Temple is handling a case. All unrelated personnel must disperse." Right at this moment, a loud voice sounded, and Baser arrived with several members of the Grey Temple's inspection office. The crowd parted to create a path for them. Due to the fact that the incident had just taken place, the battle had already concluded by the time the members of the Grey Temple arrived. Baser looked at Olaf, who was kneeling on the ground with blood all over his body, as well as the corpses of several demons and orcs, as well as the injured Blower and Sally, and a grave expression appeared on his face. Such a vicious murder in the Aiden Square was already a fourth-tier incident. He looked at the ice shards on the ground, as well as Julian and Amy, who were standing in front of Amy's. It was quite clear that they had something to do with this incident as well, and he was struck by a sense of headache. He didn't know what these guys had done to piss off Amy. "Captain Baser, here's what happened." Meg made his way over to Baser and gave him a brief recount of what had happened. Sally was definitely involved in this incident. She had killed most of the orcs and demons present, so she had to make it clear that these people deserved to die. Only then would she be able to minimize the impact of this incident and at the same time, minimize the attention of others. The mercenary squad that captured elves? Baser looked at Joshua's body and the sobbing Anna, then turned to Blower and Sally and nodded as he said, "This incident is extremely serious. So aside from that demon, those two elves also have to come back with us for investigation. I have no objections, but I hope you can immediately send people to search for a stronghold 5 kilometers north of Chaos City. There are many of our elven brethren imprisoned there. Now that these guys are dead, there's a very good chance that they'll try to escape. If that happens, regardless of whether our elven brethren are killed or relocated, it'll be a disaster for them. I don't want to see something like this happen again." Blower struggled to his feet and looked at Anna with a sympathetic expression. Baser looked at the sobbing Anna and hesitated momentarily before nodding as he said, "I'll report this incident to the higher-ups. The Grey Temple will protect the safety of Chaos City and the surrounding areas, and will oppose all illegal detentions and killings." Blower nodded before slowly making his way over to Anna. He slowly squatted down in front of her and looked into her eyes as he said, "Anna, I'm Blower. From today onward, I'll take care of you, all right?" "No, I only want Grandpa. I only want Grandpa." Anna shook her head as she pressed her face tightly against Joshua's chest. Her sobs had already become a little hoarse. Chapter 524. "Oh, I feel guilty. That's how Qingyu has been feeling recently." This month's update volume is obviously different from what I said at the beginning of the month, and the quality is indeed lacking compared to before. When the volume is low and sometimes it's a bit lacking, some readers will feel that it's lacking, and I can only say that I'm sorry, but I don't dare to refute. Here, I'll say sorry first. Then, I'll explain the recent situation. I'm not looking for an excuse, but I don't want everyone to give up because of some short-term fluctuations after all. Qingyu has been working very hard all this time, and Qingyu is confident that the more interesting and exciting plot is yet to come. This month, Qingyu has been busy with moving her household registration and buying a house. Readers who have done these things before should know that these are rather troublesome matters. She has to run all kinds of houses all day long, and then spend a lot of time doing research and understanding. If the down payment isn't enough, she has to borrow some money to make up for it. After all, this is the most important thing in her life, so Qingyu has to pay more attention to it. I can't just throw all the responsibility to my wife. Basically, it's 7 or 8 p.m. at night when I'm done running, and I'm super tired, but I still have to write 2 chapters. Sometimes, I feel like my eyes are blurry just looking at the screen, and the things I write lack some spirit. I don't have that much time to come up with interesting plots. Now that I've settled on a house, I'll go to Chengdu in 2 days to get a household registration, then get the down payment, and move to a small county. After that, I can settle down in the small county and seriously write and think about the plot. Writing is Qingyu's only job, and it's a very important thing in her life. Qingyu has been treating this matter with a very serious attitude, and I hope that everyone believes in this. Qingyu is very confident that the book won't collapse. I have the outline, and the plot is going in the right direction. After these few days of work, the plot will definitely return to normal, and the quality and updates will also return to normal. The restaurant isn't maxed out yet. Amy isn't the strongest mage yet. Mr. Mac isn't riding on the rainbow clouds to bring back his wife. How can the story end? The above is a little explanation for the content and updates during this period. I'm a little embarrassed, but also a little helpless, and I hope you can understand. After a few days of stability, I'll definitely make it up to you. Chapter 525. Can you please save those elves who are locked up in the cellar? Anna pleaded with Meg with her bright eyes. Meg was just about to tell the 2 little ones a story to coax them to sleep when he heard this. They're all locked up in metal cages. The cellar is dark and gloomy, and there's nothing to eat or drink. Grandpa said that if we don't save them, many of them will die. Anna wore a sympathetic expression as she looked at Meg with tears welling up in her eyes. Father, please save them. They're so pitiful. Amy also looked at Meg with wide eyes as she pleaded with him. Meg was struck by the sight of the 2 adorable little elves acting coquettishly. A surge of blood suddenly welled up in his heart. Those human traffickers who targeted elves deserved to be sliced into 1,000 pieces. Who knew how many elves were being tortured in that dark cellar? God knew how long it would take for the Grey Temple to send people to search for that stronghold. If those people lost their leader and became desperate, the consequences would be unimaginable. Meg could still vividly remember the scene of Joshua dying in front of him. That was just an old elf on the brink of death, but he had the courage and determination to die in a fit of rage. After coming to this world, Meg had sensed the severity of the mess left behind by Meg Alex, as well as the power of those enemies lurking in the dark. As such, Meg restrained his vicious nature and tried to keep a low profile. He even forgot what hot-bloodedness was and only thought about how to hide his identity and protect Amy from harm. He didn't want to get too involved in anything else. However, as he looked into Amy and Anna's clear eyes, a hint of guilt welled up in his heart. From the beginning to the end, he deliberately avoided this topic with Anna. Other than not wanting to make Anna sad, perhaps there was another reason that he didn't want to know too much. If he knew too much, he would feel ashamed if he didn't do anything. Yes, he seemed to have forgotten what kind of person he was. He wasn't Megshin, because Megshin had always been straightforward with his words. Occasionally, he would even be a little hot-blooded. He had a poisonous tongue, but most of the time, he hit the nail on the head. Those restaurants closed down not because of his poisonous tongue, but because there was indeed a problem. Even more restaurants became popular on the internet after being despised by him. This was because other than their shortcomings, their strengths were not ignored by him. He was also not Meg Alex, because Alex always spoke with his sword. If there was injustice in the world, he would settle it with his sword. Those who died under his sword included evil knights, man-eating demons, and evil dragons that attacked villages. As long as he heard about evil people that others couldn't kill, the purple-striped griffin would descend on their heads and cut off their heads with a single slash. But now, he had placed heavy shackles on himself. He had lost his purity and hot-bloodedness. He had also lost the bravery and sacrifice of a knight. He had become a commoner that he used to look down on. A father like this shouldn't be the kind of father that Amy wants and likes, right? If he only thinks about running away from problems instead of solving them, how can he be a good father and take care of a family? Meg murmured to himself in his heart. One question after another struck his soul, and a thought suddenly appeared in the depths of his mind. Meg's eyes also lit up again. Perhaps it's time to make some changes? Anna, do you know where that place is? If I ask you to take us there now, can you tell me the way? Meg took a deep breath as he looked at Anna. I remember where it is. Grandpa said that we left Chaos City from the northern part of the city, and then we went all the way down. We passed by a small river and followed the river. Anna immediately sat up and looked at Meg with a serious expression as she recounted the route. All right, then we'll go and save them in a while. Meg looked at Anna, who was reciting the route in a clear and organized manner. It clearly wouldn't be a problem for them to find that base again. Really? Anna's eyes immediately lit up as she looked at Meg with excitement in her eyes. I knew Father would agree to it, because Father is a true hero. Amy also sat up and looked at Meg with elation in her eyes. Ugly Duckling, who was sandwiched between them, looked around with a confused expression. It had fallen asleep as soon as it lay down on the bed and had no idea what had happened. You two play upstairs for a while. I'll go and make some preparations. Meg was also very happy at the sight of Amy's elated smile and sparkling eyes. He then turned and walked toward the door as he murmured to himself, There's still some dough left, and there's still a lot of braised meat left. Half an hour later, Meg pushed the bicycle out of the restaurant and carried Amy, who had changed into a magician's robe, to the basket in front of the bicycle. He then carried the curious Anna, who had also changed into a blue magician's robe, to the back seat of the bicycle and locked the door. He carried a large food container in his hand and got onto the bicycle. Let's go. Amy yelled with elation as she raised her hands high into the air. Meg smiled as he stepped hard on the pedals, and the bicycle immediately sped forward. Anna was initially quite curious, but she looked down at the rapidly rolling wheels beneath her. Such a fast bicycle was only supported by 2 small wheels, and she reflexively grabbed onto Meg's clothes and closed her eyes, not daring to look. Amy, who was trying to sit in the basket for the first time, was giggling with elation. Don't be scared. This is a bicycle. You won't fall. Meg felt his clothes tighten around his stomach, and he comforted her in a gentle voice. Anna was struck by an inexplicable sense of relief upon hearing Meg's words, and she did indeed feel very safe sitting there. The refreshing autumn breeze blew against her face, and she could hear Amy's elated laughter. She hesitated momentarily before slowly opening her eyes. The trees beside her were flying past quickly, and it was rather similar to riding a horse, but it was much steadier. It was a very peculiar feeling, but she still didn't let go of Meg's clothes. The bicycle passed through the streets of Chaos City, and there weren't many pedestrians left on the streets. All that was left was a string of gurgling sounds and dumbstruck expressions on the faces of the drunken pedestrians. The bicycle stopped outside a courtyard in a residential area in the northern part of the city. Meg alighted and carried Amy and Anna off the bicycle. Father, aren't we going to save those elves? Why are we here? Amy looked at the courtyard with a perplexed expression. Anna was also looking at Meg with a peculiar expression, but she didn't say anything. Chapter 5:26. Mr. Mac. The door creaked open, and Mond, who was a little sleepy, was shocked to see Meg standing at the door. He immediately turned to the yard and shouted, Boss, Mr. Mac is here. Demon. Anna looked at Mond and took 2 steps back in fear. She almost fell down. Don't be afraid, Miss Anna. Baldy is not a bad guy. Amy comforted her as she reached out to support Anna. Why are you so careless, Mond? You scared the little girl. Is this something that we lava demons should do? Sardras walked out with a straight face, but quickly put on a small face. He looked at Meg and the others and said, Mr. Mac and little boss, why are you here so late? Then, he looked at Anna and grinned, revealing a row of neat white teeth. He smiled and said, Little friend, Mond isn't a bad guy. He just looks a little silly. Don't be afraid. Keel and the others also walked to the door and looked out curiously. However, after seeing Anna's frightened expression, they all stayed in the yard obediently. However, Sargeras, who was bald, muscular, and had lava streaks all over his face, didn't seem any more approachable than Mond. As such, Anna didn't feel reassured by his words. Instead, she inched closer to Mag and Sargeras as she looked at them with a hint of fear in her eyes. The demons had been hunting them all this time. Why was Mag bringing her to the demons now? Was he trying to sell her? Don't be afraid. Although they are demons, they are not bad people. There are also good people among demons. Meg looked at Anna, who was a little flustered and alert, and comforted her gently. They are not bad people? Anna looked at Meg's sincere eyes, and then at Sargeras' eyes. Grandpa had taught her how to distinguish between good and bad people. The eyes didn't lie. She didn't see any malice in Sargeras' eyes. He was indeed different from the demons who were chasing them. Baldy isn't a bad guy. He helped us beat up some bad guys before. Although he's ugly, he's surprisingly a good person. Amy nodded in agreement. Should I thank little boss for her compliment? Sargeras said with a strange expression. He was helpless against Amy's sharp tongue. He turned to look at Meg and curiously asked, Mr. Mac, is there something you want us to do for you? Why are you looking for us so late at night? If you have any difficulties, feel free to tell us. As long as we can do it, we will definitely help you. Mond and the others nodded in agreement. They were all looking at Mag with kindness and even a hint of fanaticism in their eyes. I did come to disturb you so late because I need your help with something. Meg nodded at Sargeras and handed over the lunchbox in his hand as he said, We're going to rescue some elves who are being held captive by the Demon Mercenary Corps. This is your reward. Mr. Mac, there's no need to talk about rewards between us. Are you looking down on the Burning Legion? Take this back. Sargeras shook his head and was about to push the lunchbox back to Meg when he suddenly sniffed hard. Is that the smell of holy Ruggiamo? He murmured to himself in confusion. Yes, it's a Ruggiamo. Meg nodded with a smile. Yes. Mond, Keel, and the others' eyes lit up as they looked at the lunchbox in Meg's hand in unison. Mr. Mac, you're too kind. Do we really need to be like this between us? Sargeras' eyes also lit up. Although he spoke politely, he immediately hugged Meg's lunchbox in his arms and solemnly said, Mr. Mac, the Burning Legion will fuck whoever you want. Yes, fuck him. The lava demons chimed in. Then I'll have to trouble you tonight, Meg said with a smile. Sargeras raised the lunchbox high above his head and loudly said, Burning Legion, let's go. For the holy Ruggiamo. All the demons answered in unison. Their voices were so loud that it caused a commotion among the neighbors. They thought something had happened. Meg wanted to cover his face. They were using the name of the Burning Legion, but they actually shouted such a shameful slogan. For the holy Ruggiamo. These demons are so cute. For the holy Ruggiamo? Anna also looked at Sargeras and the others in surprise. She didn't know what Meg had just handed to that big demon to make them so excited. However, it sounded like they didn't intend to sell her out, and they even made the demons agree to fight demons with them. She was amazed. Do you want to eat something before you set off? Meg asked Sargeras, trying not to laugh. No, we'll eat when we start the charge. The Ruggiamo can obviously improve our fighting power. Besides, it's dark now. We can use the lava flames to light up the place. Sargeras shook his head. He looked at Meg with a silly smile and said, Mr. Mac, where are those bastards now? Let's go and kill them now. Only Anna knows the location, so we'll go with you. Let's go now. Meg put Amy and Anna back on the bicycle. He looked back at Sargeras with a smile and said, You should be able to keep up with us, right? Don't worry about us, Mr. Mac. We'll wait for you, Sargeras said with a silly smile. Don't be so sure. Meg shook his head non-committally. Then he stepped hard, and the bicycle shot out like an arrow. Fuck, what is Mr. Mac riding? Sargeras stared. Then he tucked the lunchbox under his armpit, picked up a foldable stool and said, Hurry up. Meg parked the bicycle at the north gate for a while before Sargeras and the others arrived. They weren't out of breath, but it was obviously not easy for them to run all the way here. "Mr. Mac, what is that thing you're riding? How can it be so fast?" Sargeras looked at Meg in disbelief. He didn't expect that they couldn't even outrun Mr. Mac. "It's a bicycle." Meg smiled. He was now in better condition than the most professional cyclists in his previous life. With a top-notch professional bicycle, he could easily go over 100 kilometers per hour. Of course, he had an advantage on flat roads. However, he didn't want to waste too much time on this. As he got back on the bicycle, he said, "Let's keep going. If we're late, they might have already left." Not long after they left the city, the road started to get bumpy. Under Anna's guidance, Mag quickly abandoned the carriage and began to walk along the little road. Not long after, a big courtyard in an abandoned village appeared before everyone's eyes. Chapter 5:27. Hurry up, gather all of the good-looking piglets, and prepare to transport them away through the tunnels. Kill all of the rest. Don't leave a single one alive," Terry said in a cold voice. Even though he was forcing himself to remain calm and collected, there was still a hint of panic in his eyes. He was supposed to be on his way to the Demon Islands by now, but Olaf had suddenly received news that the stronghold had been exposed at noon, so he had stayed behind as a precaution. As a result, Olaf had followed Ebenezer to pursue the old man and the little brat that night. His subordinates had just reported that Olaf and the others had most likely encountered an accident, and that the stronghold had been exposed. Olaf was the backbone of the entire mercenary group, and even Ebenezer was more powerful than him. Now that both of them had met with mishap, the mercenary group was dealt a massive blow. However, this also allowed him to become the most powerful person in the entire mercenary group. Aside from his panic, he was also a little excited. If he could keep all of his subordinates and sell these piglets, then he would no longer have to be the third most powerful person in the mercenary group. Instead, he would become the true boss of the mercenary group. In the underground cellar, demons and orcs were holding torches as they violently tugged at the elves' hair. The young elves and the elderly elves were separated, and those who were slow to react would have whips or be kicked to the ground. However, the elves remained eerily silent. Their expressions were completely blank, and even when whips struck their bodies, they would only groan softly. Their eyes were completely devoid of life, and they were like a bunch of walking zombies that were completely at the mercy of their captors. "Boss, don't blame me for not saving you. You can only blame your bad luck. I'll sell all of these piglets, and I'll also help you run your mercenary group well." Terry held onto the railing with both hands as he looked down at his subordinates and elves. His heart rate accelerated, and a sickly flush appeared on his face. "Big Baddie, hurry up and surrender. Otherwise, we're going to fight our way in." Right at this moment, a tender voice sounded from outside. What's that sound?" Terry asked with furrowed brows. "Sir Terry, there's a human with 2 little piglets barking outside the gate. One of the little piglets seems to be the one that followed the old man here at noon." A beast man quickly ran in and reported. "How many people have come?" Terry's expression changed as he asked. The orc was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly said, "Just 3. There's no one else." "What's so special about that human?" Terry asked again. "There's nothing special about him. He looks just like an ordinary human. He doesn't even have a weapon in his hand." The orc shook his head. "Little piggy, I was wondering where to find you. I didn't expect you to come to me yourself. I have to kill you to avenge Boss Oliver." A sinister smile appeared on Terry's face as he quickly walked towards the entrance of the courtyard. He then coldly said to the beastmen and demons guarding the entrance, "Open the door." "Father, are they afraid to open the door because they don't dare to?" Outside the courtyard, about 10 meters away from the gate, Amy and Anna stood beside Meg. Amy looked up at Meg and asked. Anna looked at the pitch-black courtyard and felt a little scared and sad. She and her grandfather had come here this afternoon, and that was why they were chased by those demons and orcs. Perhaps. Meg narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked in the direction of the gate. Those guys were most likely already frightened by the mere twang of a bow, and they were most likely busy evacuating people. This abandoned village was very secluded, and this dark courtyard was even more unremarkable. The Grey Temple only had an approximate location, so it would take a very long time for them to find this place. Little brats, who gave you the courage to come here and seek death? The door creaked open, and Terry walked out with a few demons and orcs behind him. They were all holding torches as they stared at Meg and the two little brats beside him. Liang Jingru. Meg nodded with a serious expression. Terry raised an eyebrow as he looked at Meg with narrowed eyes. He was a little hesitant as he thought to himself, who is Liang Jingru? Could it be that she's a powerful human being? Otherwise, why would this guy dare to provoke us with these two little brats? We're here to save people. If you know what's good for you, release all of the elves you've imprisoned as soon as possible, and I'll consider handing you over to the Grey Temple alive. Meg looked at Terry with a hint of warning in his voice. That's right, big bad guy. Hurry up and surrender. Otherwise, we won't hold back. Amy chimed in with a serious expression. Terry was so enraged that he burst into laughter. He looked at Meg with a sinister smile and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot, little brat? Seeing as you've delivered yourself to me, you'll be my supper tonight. As for these two little piggies, I'm going to sell them on the black market on Demon Island. I'm sure there will be a lot of people who will like them." Lu Sun once said that people always use their shortcomings to attack others in an attempt to divert the attention of others. After seeing you, I believe him. Meg looked at Terry and sighed as he said, "Where did you get the confidence to call elves piggies? If I had to find a pig here, I'd think you'd look the most like one, right?" You. Terry's eyes widened with rage, while the orcs and demons standing nearby all tried their best not to burst into laughter. Father is so awesome. Amy looked up at Meg with a hint of reverence in her eyes. For the first time, she discovered that her father's words were also quite funny. A smile also appeared on Anna's face, and even her tense mood had eased significantly. That demon really did look a little like a pig, and it was a little comical, but it didn't seem all that scary anymore. Damned human, I'm going to kill you today. Terry roared with rage. As a berserk demonic pig, what he hated the most was being called a pig. That was the biggest insult to him. His eyes immediately turned red, and a pair of large fangs appeared on his mouth as he pounced toward Meg and the others. I'm very disappointed in your performance. Meg shook his head before raising his right hand as he yelled, "Burning Legion, attack." Sargera's voice sounded, "For the Holy Rugiamo." An orderly and loud voice rang out, and a group of flaming lava demons suddenly rushed out of the dense forest nearby. Each and every one of them was holding a Rugiamo, and they were munching on it. Chapter 528. Meg had always been quite fond of the foldable chair, which was one of the top 10 most lethal weapons in the world. Sargeras was able to use the foldable chair in a way that was both powerful and aesthetically pleasing to the eye. He was undoubtedly the best in the world. As such, when the foldable chair landed on Terry's horrified and twisted face and sent him flying into the courtyard wall right before the astonished eyes of all of the demons and orcs, Tang Walin couldn't help but nod with approval in his eyes. The rest of the lava demons instantly annihilated all of the remaining demons and orcs, and the battle concluded in an extremely short time due to their overwhelming power. That was awesome. Anna's eyes widened as she looked on at the demons and orcs being crushed by the lava demons. Those abhorrent and terrifying beings in her eyes appeared to be extremely weak in the face of the flaming lava demons. In contrast, the lava demons that she had initially found to be quite fearsome had suddenly become adorable in her eyes, and all of the fear in her heart was instantly erased. Amy's father is so awesome. He can get so many demons to help him just by offering them delicious food, and all he has to do is watch from the sidelines, Anna thought to herself as she turned her gaze to Meg with reverence in her eyes. Sargeras swatted away the door that a few demons were trying to close in a hurry, then dragged Terry down from the wall before tossing him in front of Meg. He then stomped a foot onto his back as he turned to Meg and said, "Mr. Mac, how do you want to deal with this guy?" Terry was completely dizzy from the impact of the foldable chair, and he felt as if his head didn't belong to him anymore. He was a 7th-tier demon, after all, and even though his combat prowess was slightly lacking, he had only ever been in such a powerless state against Olaf. Lava demons! Terry exclaimed as he came to his senses, and he could sense the terrifyingly high temperatures on his back, as well as the scorching flames burning all over his body. A horrified look appeared on his face. The Lava Fiend race was once a legendary race among the fiends. Their extraordinary ability to control fire and formidable strength made them one of the top 3 fiend races. Although they had been declining in recent years, it had to be admitted that lava fiends were still peak existences among those of the same rank. And here, there were actually so many lava demons. What was even more unbelievable was that they were actually obeying the orders of a human. Don't kill me. I was also forced by Olaf. I actually sympathize with those elves. Terry looked at Meg with a panicked expression. He didn't know who this human was. Knock him out, put him in a sack, and hand him over to the people of the Grey Temple. Meg looked at Terry with a calm expression. He couldn't be bothered to listen to Terry's nonsense. Bang! Following a muffled thump, Terry's voice abruptly stopped. Sargeras put away the folding chair and looked at Meg with a silly smile as he said, "Mr. Mac, there are still some guys inside. Let's take care of them first, and then you can come in." "All right, thank you for your trouble." Meg nodded with a smile as he glanced at Terry, who was lying on the ground. Sargeras hadn't been holding back in the slightest, and he didn't know if Terry would still be alive after being struck by the folding chair. Sargeras rushed into the courtyard with the lava demons and began to clean up the remaining demons and orcs. The basic procedure was to knock them out with a chair or a staff, then stuff them into sacks. It was as if he were harvesting prey, and a pile of sacks was quickly stacked up in the center of the courtyard. "What's going on up there? You two go up there and take a look." The commotion in the courtyard quickly spread to the underground cellar, and a leader who was commanding the demons and orcs listened in with a nervous expression. He had some understanding of the situation, and if the Grey Temple really did come looking for them, then they most likely wouldn't be able to escape today. "Is someone here to save us?" The elves, who were being pushed around like livestock, also heard the commotion above them. A ripple appeared in their eyes, which were like a pool of stagnant water. Then, a trace of hope appeared in their eyes again. What's that commotion? Several kilometers away, many people were searching in a fan-shaped formation. All of a sudden, Blower turned toward the northwestern direction, where bright flames had lit up. At the same time, the sounds of explosions and battle could be heard, creating a particularly clear contrast in the dark night. Not long after they were taken to the Grey Temple, Yngve came to bail them out. There were plenty of witnesses, so Blower and Sally's actions were deemed to be self-defense and rescue. They didn't violate any of the laws of Chaos City, so they were released on the spot. Blower requested for the Grey Temple to send people out of the city to search for the stronghold where the elves were being held. Yngve used his status as the elven ambassador to negotiate, so the complicated procedures were quickly completed. After some simple treatment, Blower and Sally were sent out of the city to search for the elves with the Grey Temple. However, the location that Joshua had given them prior to his death was far too vague. The area to the north of Chaos City spanned a boundless expanse of 5 kilometers, and finding a stronghold that had been disguised as a stronghold was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Even Blower was beginning to lose confidence, and he didn't know if they would be able to find the stronghold before they left. That place is also within a 5-kilometer radius, so it's most suspicious to see it now. Chapter 529. In the depths of the pitch-black cellar, there were 2 torches lit. A skinny demon with a black horn on his forehead and a pair of dark green eyes was holding a little elf girl hostage. A sharp bone knife grew out of his bony fingers, and he placed it against the little elf girl's throat. A line of blood was cut into her delicate skin, and he was looking at Mag and the others with a fierce expression. Behind him were a dozen or so fearful demons and orcs who were wielding weapons. The situation above was still unclear, but the fact that these guys were able to make it here meant that their brothers above had most likely been wiped out. What made them even more fearful was that the leader of these people was a lava demon, followed by 2 little piglets and a human. There were even more lava demons with flames burning all over their bodies. The most powerful being here was the 5th-tier leader, Zabuk, but if even the 7th-tier leader, Terry, had been defeated, then they could only rely on these little piglets. The elves who had been imprisoned and tortured for a long time all turned toward the entrance of the cellar. The lava demons with red flames burning all over their bodies struck fear into their hearts. If they were to escape from these demons, only to fall into the hands of even more powerful demons, that would be an even more tragic nightmare for them. However, the elves soon turned to the little half-elf girl behind the lava demon, and their eyes immediately lit up. Her purple magician robes were rather regal and luxurious. Even though she was a half-elf, her delicate features and pointy ears made her look no different from a true elf. Of course, that wasn't important. What was important was that this little half-elf girl had appeared here. Could it be that these people were really here to save them? These demons and orcs, who usually acted like tyrants and treated them like livestock, were now trembling in fear. This had never happened before. However, his life was still in their hands. Sharp weapons were placed on their bodies. If there was a conflict between the two sides, who knew how many of them would die? However, they were fearless. Rather than being tortured in this dark cellar and becoming slaves with no freedom in the future, death was a form of release. At the very least, they could still see a glimmer of light and hope. If death could exchange for the freedom of some of their brethren, then they were willing to pay the price. Mag was holding a rectangular object in his hand, and he wore a grave expression as he looked at the pairs of eyes that had lit up in the dim cellar. On either side of the passageway was a series of metal cages that were less than a meter tall. Some of the elderly elves were crammed into the cages, and they couldn't even straighten their backs. Aside from the dampness in the air, there was also a foul stench in the air. The tattered clothes of these elves were stained with all types of filth. It was very difficult to imagine how these clean freaks could survive in such an environment, and what kind of physical and mental torture they had to endure. A sense of fury welled up in Meg's heart. Even though the Elven race had been one of the masterminds behind the conspiracy against Meg Alex 3 years ago, Meg still had a good impression of most of the elves in the Elven race. They were half of Amy's race, and they were generally peace-loving and nature-loving elves. They were the easiest race to get along with on the Norland continent, but now they were being treated like livestock. Sargeras was also enraged upon seeing this. Even though he was also a demon, lava demons had their own bottom line and would never attack the weak. However, these guys clearly didn't think that way. They had no bottom line at all for imprisoning and humiliating these elves. However, all of these elves were being controlled, and many of them were being threatened with weapons. Even though they could easily crush these demons and orcs, they weren't confident in their ability to save these elves, so they didn't dare to do anything rash. Zabako heaved an internal sigh of relief at the sight of Sargeras. This lava demon was giving him the most pressure, and it appeared that he was the leader of these people. Seeing as he cared about the lives of these piglets, then he was confident that he could use these piglets to exchange for their lives. In fact, he could even exchange them for more things, such as a hefty sum of money. With that in mind, a faint smile appeared on Zabako's face, and he felt a little more confident. He turned to Sargeras and yelled, "If you want to save these piglets, then you'd better not do anything rash. Otherwise, my saber will slice through her veins, and there's no way you can be faster than my saber. Now, you only have one choice, and that is, all of you bastards should be beaten to death." Right at this moment, a mellow voice sounded. Amy was standing behind Sargeras, and she was glaring at Zabako with an enraged expression. Her staff had appeared in her hand, and purplish golden light was flashing within the oracle stone like lightning. Heh. Zack chuckled at the sight of Amy, and he didn't take her seriously at all. A little piglet of her age was no different from a normal human child. All she knew was to play with mud, so he didn't take her seriously at all. Instead, he was more concerned about Sargera's opinion. "I Soul Lotus, I seal domain." Amy pointed her staff at Zabako as she yelled in her delicate voice. Dazzling white light suddenly appeared, and a translucent lotus flower drifted out, appearing directly above Zabako in the blink of an eye. The temperature in the entire underground cellar abruptly dropped by close to 10 degrees, and snowflakes drifted down from above Zabako and the demons. Frost appeared on the faces of all of the elves and demons, and all of them froze on the spot. It was as if the entire space had been frozen in an instant. The smile on Zabako's face stiffened, and a hint of horror appeared in his eyes. The bone saber in his hand was trembling slightly as he attempted to break free from the effects of the ice seal. Right at this moment, a red cube of unknown material flew over the crowd and struck Zabako in the face with unerring accuracy like a precision-guided RPG. Blood splattered in all directions, and Zabako's body fell back uncontrollably. The bone saber that was pressed against the little elven girl's neck was also flung away, and he crashed to the ground with his eyes wide open. Before he passed out, he still hadn't figured out what that red cube of unknown material was. Kill them all, Burning Legion. Sargeras faltered slightly before immediately rushing forward with his foldable chair. Every time he swung his chair, a demon or orc would fall to the ground. In the blink of an eye, all of the temporarily frozen demons and orcs had been subdued by the Burning Legion, and not a single elf had been injured in the battle. Chapter 530. This is the place. Blower and Sally arrived outside the small courtyard. There were still some large footprints and scorch marks left on the ground. The gate of the courtyard had already been shattered, and there were still some residual magic waves and scorching heat in the air, clearly indicating that a fierce battle had just taken place here. Both Blower and Sally wore cautious expressions. They didn't know if there were more powerful demons in the mercenary squad. Furthermore, judging from the traces left behind, the demons who had just fought were most likely no less powerful than them. They didn't know if they were friends or foes, so they had to be extra careful. The two of them slowly approached the gate of the courtyard with their wands tightly gripped in preparation to unleash magic at a moment's notice. Whoosh! Blower cast an illumination spell into the courtyard, and a white ball of light exploded in the air, illuminating the entire courtyard. What's this? Blower and Sally were already preparing to spring into action, but they were immediately rooted to the spot at the sight of the burlap sacks strewn all over the courtyard. All of the burlap sacks had clearly been filled with items, leaving behind charred carcasses that had been left behind in the aftermath of the battle. Why does this feel so familiar? Sally's brows furrowed as she thought to herself in confusion. The battle here had just ended, but aside from these sacks, there was nothing else left. It's demons and orcs. These guys should all be members of the mercenary squad, but they've all been knocked unconscious. Who did this? Blower untied a few of the gunny sacks with furrowed brows. Tie them up first, then find another place to hide. They shouldn't have gone too far, and the captured elves haven't been found yet. Brantley arrived with the Grey Temple members, and he was panting slightly. As a magic caster, his constitution was still a little weak. There's a sound coming from over there. Sally listened for a while before pointing in the direction of a corner of the courtyard. It's a cellar. Those elves are most likely locked up down there. Let's go down there and take a look. Blower rushed over to find that there was a passageway in the corner that led underground. There were still traces of scorch marks on the walls, and a scorching aura lingered in the air. Without any hesitation, he jumped down and quickly made his way down the passageway. Sally looked at Blower's departing figure with a complex expression. She also jumped down and quickly followed after him. Leave a few people up there to keep watch. The rest of you, follow me down. We can't let a single demon or orc go, Brantley said as he jumped down into the passageway with his wand in his hand, and a cautious expression appeared on his face as he made his way down. The demons and beast men in the underground cellar had all been taken care of. Amy put away the ice soul lotus floating in the air, and the snowflakes suddenly stopped falling. The freezing temperatures gradually rose, and with the help of the lava demon's flames, the frozen elves quickly regained their senses. The elves stared blankly at the fallen demons and orcs as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. You're all free now. Amy stepped forward and looked at the elves with certainty. This sentence was like a clap of thunder, and all of the elves' eyes widened. Their hearts, which had been silent for a long time, began to beat faster. Their blood flowed faster through their veins, and their emotions exploded. A burst of joyous cheers erupted from the cellar. Some elves wept tears of joy, while others embraced one another. After enduring countless torments, this day had finally come. They didn't think that they would be freed one day. However, most of them were staring intently at Amy with gratitude, reverence, and even fanaticism in their eyes. This sentence. Back then, Princess Irina always said this sentence when she saved us. However, we haven't heard from her for over 3 years. Is someone finally going to save us now? This little girl is a prodigy. An elderly elf looked at Amy with an intense light in his eyes. Even though she was still very young, she was definitely a super prodigy for being able to cast such powerful magic at her age. If she really was willing to save these wandering elves, then it wouldn't take long for her to become as powerful as Princess Irina had been all those years ago. The scene of Amy using her magic to freeze everyone was simply too shocking. Many of the elves were clearly aware of this, so they were all looking at Amy with anticipation in their eyes. Amy, you're so awesome. Anna, who was standing in the corner, looked at Amy with her eyes wide open. They were both children, so why was she so outstanding? A smile also appeared on her little face as she looked at the elves who had regained their freedom. She murmured to herself, if Grandpa knew about this, he would definitely be very happy, right? Meg silently stowed away the brick in his hand. As a powerful weapon that could be switched between 3 battle modes, its edges could deal 1.5 times the damage, and its corners could deal 2 times the critical strike rate. The brick was one of the most essential weapons for traveling and home defense. Furthermore, it could be obtained at any time, and it had a wide range of uses, so it had a unique status in the world. At the same time, due to its small size, its attack speed was greatly enhanced, and it could also be hurled, making up for its inability to attack from medium to long distances. Even with the advent of the electronic age, the brick's status still hadn't declined. It could often be used as a substitute for bags, which fully demonstrated its versatility. In any case, Meg had already proven that the brick he had purchased from the system for a copper coin was still very useful. After using the brick, a smile appeared on Meg's face as he looked at Amy, who was being revered by all of the elves. If he wanted to be recognized as a half-elf, then the entire elven race had to acknowledge him first. It was clearly unrealistic to change the pedantic elves in the Wind Forest. However, for these elves who were roaming the Norland continent and were in danger of being hunted down, anyone who could protect them, even if they were only a half-elf, would be worshipped by them with fervent zeal. This was the new blueprint that Meg had just unfurled today. If these elves could return to the Wind Forest with dignity one day, or if they could return to the elven race in the form of a counterattack, then perhaps their attitude could change the entire elven race's attitude. That was very important. Of course, Amy's happiness was even more important. Amy was indeed very happy to receive all of the elves' gratitude and reverence as they looked at her with fervent zeal. She had never been praised and thanked by so many people before, and this was a heartfelt display of gratitude from so many elves. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. I only defeated the bad guys. Big Sister Anna and Grandpa told us to come and save you. Amy waved her little hands in a slightly embarrassed manner. Chapter 531. The flames burning on the lava demons' bodies lit up the inky black underground cellar. There were unconscious demons and orcs strewn all over the ground, while the elves in ragged clothes were celebrating their survival. Aside from that, there were also Meg, Amy, and Anna standing off to the side. Blower looked on with a surprised expression. It appeared that they were too late. These elves had clearly already been rescued by Meg and the others. Furthermore, they were all looking at Amy with expressions of reverence and gratitude in their eyes. It appeared that Amy had played an important role in saving the elves' lives. The elves in the underground cellar were all riddled with wounds, especially those who were being held in low metal cages. Even though he had heard some rumors about them in the Wind Forest, seeing them in person still made his soul tremble, and the rage that welled up in his heart made him want to kill all of them. "Boss Amy!" Sally also exclaimed in surprise. She didn't think that she would encounter Meg and the others here. Furthermore, It appeared that they had already rescued all of the elves trapped here. Furthermore, she also knew why she had felt that the aura up there was rather familiar. It was the lava demons who had rescued them. Sally's mind went completely blank at the sight of those half-clothed elves who had been stuffed into metal cages like livestock. She couldn't even sit up straight, and a buzzing sound reverberated in her head. She couldn't believe that something like this was happening to her fellow elves. And what was even more unacceptable to her was that the culprits behind this were the self-proclaimed nobles of the Wind Forest, and they were only doing this to satisfy their own selfish desires. She was also one of them, and had enjoyed all of this as a matter of course for the past 20-odd years. She had even set her goal to bring them back to the Wind Forest. She had never detested her identity as much as she did now. She detested the elven law and system that she had once enjoyed so much. It turned out that all of the major families were hiding such disgusting crimes behind their glamorous facades. They colluded with demons and orcs to enslave their own brethren. What kind of insane people would do such a thing? Mr. Mac? Brantley came down with the people from the Grey Temple, and he also wore an enraged expression upon seeing the situation in the underground cellar. All of the elves retracted their smiles at the sight of Blower and the others, and they all looked at them with wary and fearful expressions. Big Sister Aisha, Big Sister Cece, you're late. Amy turned to Sally and Cece with an elated smile. However, she quickly turned to the elves and said, "Don't be scared. They're not bad people. Big Sister Aisha and the others are here to save you. I didn't think that Mr. Mac and little Amy would be able to save the elves. You two are the heroes." Blower was feeling very conflicted, but he was relieved to see that all of the elves present were unscathed. He had been worried that they would be teleported away or suffer even more severe injuries, but the current situation was clearly a lot better than he had anticipated. Anna asked us to come and rescue them. She still remembers the location. The situation was urgent, so I asked Sargeras and the others for help. The demons and orcs have all been taken care of, but the elves who were locked up here have some injuries. Perhaps you can treat them, Mag said to everyone. He explained the situation to them, and at the same time, passed the blame to them. Hee, it's all thanks to little Amy. We're just here to help. Sargeras gave a bashful smile as he flattered Amy. I am Brantley from Chaos City's Grey Temple. The Grey Temple is very concerned about what happened near Chaos City. Rest assured, if you're willing to come to Chaos City, we'll do our best to provide you with protection and assistance. Brantley stepped forward with a solemn expression. He then waved a hand and instructed, "Get them out of the cages first. Those who know healing magic, come and treat them." Amy's explanation and Brantley's words eased the elves' minds. The people from the Grey Temple smashed open the cages and freed the elves. Some of the magic casters who knew healing magic began to treat the injured elves. However, most of the magic casters weren't very powerful, and there were no less than 100 elves in the cellar, so it was quite difficult for them to treat the injured elves. Cece made her way over to Sally with a concerned expression and asked, "Young Mistress Aisha, are you all right?" I'm fine." Sally came to her senses and shook her head with a confused expression. Cece didn't ask any questions. Instead, she turned to the elves with a sympathetic expression and said, "It looks like they need our help. Some of the elves are quite severely injured, and there are too many of them. I may not be enough to treat them all on my own." Sally looked at the severely injured elves with a hesitant expression. Her eyes were filled with pain as she thought to herself, "They're in this state because of us. What right do I have to treat them and accept their gratitude? Then I'll be going now." Cece took a meaningful look at Sally before departing toward the elves. She had traveled the Norland continent with Lulu for over 100 years, so she was more or less familiar with this situation. Blower looked into Sally's eyes with a serious expression and said, "Many years before the princess returned to the Wind Forest, she destroyed many mercenary squads that targeted the elves, and saved countless elves who had been captured. Almost no demons or orcs dared to touch the elves who roamed the continent ever again." A hint of light seemed to have appeared in Sally's eyes, and the confusion in her eyes receded. She looked at Blower with a serious expression and nodded as she said, I agree to what you said last night. As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly made her way over to the elderly elf who was lying on the ground. After a brief conversation, green light drifted out of her wand and landed on the wound on his chest. The wound quickly healed, and his pale complexion also began to improve. Things went smoother than I expected. She really is a good girl, even though she's still not as good as I am. Blower looked on as Sally quickly made her way over to the next elf. With the addition of Sally and Cece, the efficiency and effectiveness of the treatment were significantly enhanced. The severely injured elves were prioritized for treatment in the underground cellar, while the less injured elves were led out of the underground cellar by Meg and the others. Phew. After returning to the surface, the elves were surrounded by darkness, and only the stars and moon in the sky were bright. However, after breathing in the fresh air and feeling the gentle autumn breeze, the elves who had regained their freedom couldn't help but heave a long sigh of relief. Many of them couldn't help but sob again. Chapter 532. The elves' injuries had all been treated very well, and Cece had woven simple clothes for them using grass and leaves, which were much better than those old, smelly clothes. I also want to learn healing magic so that I can treat them in the future, Amy thought to herself as she stood off to the side. Thank you so much. The elves expressed their gratitude to everyone. They had regained their freedom above ground, and their injuries had been healed. Their hearts had been rejuvenated, and life had been rejuvenated. This was something that they didn't dare to believe in the dark underground cellar. Most of the elves turned to Amy. Even though she was a half-elf, she had conquered them with her power, and her proclamation of "You're free" had touched many of their hearts. They began to miss Princess Irina in the days when they didn't have to worry about being hunted down. Even though this little girl was still young, perhaps one day, another powerful half-elf who was willing to protect them would appear on the Norland continent. You're welcome, Amy replied happily as she put away her magic caster's staff. Is there anything else we can do for you, Mr. Mac? Sargeras asked Meg as he made his way over to them with a mouthful of Ruggiamo in his mouth. It's all done. Thank you for your hard work tonight, everyone from the Burning Legion. Meg placed a hand gently on Amy's head as he turned to Sargeras and the others with a grateful expression. He was very satisfied with the friendship that had been forged through Ruggiamo. You're welcome, Mr. Mac. We're going back now. We still have a mission to complete tomorrow. Sargeras stroked his big bald head with a bashful smile and waved at Amy as he said, We're going now, little boss. Goodbye, Big Baldy and all the other Baldies. Amy also waved her little hand. By the way, the Ruggiamo is so delicious. Sargeras took a few steps forward with the demons before turning back with a bashful smile. The group of lava demons with red flames burning all over their bodies gradually disappeared into the distance like a moving ball of fire. Amy yawned, looked up at Meg, and asked, Father, when are we going home to sleep? If that's the case, Meg looked at Anna, who was looking up at the sky, and asked softly, Anna, are you coming back with us or with him tonight? Blower made his way over to Anna before squatting down in front of her and looking into her eyes with a serious expression as he said, Anna, old man Joshua asked me to take care of you. I'll take good care of you. Big sister Anna, if you come with us, you'll be able to sleep on a soft little bed and play with a lot of toys. Most importantly, you'll be able to eat super delicious ice cream and other delicacies every day, Amy said to Anna in an enticing manner. Well, Anna looked at the earnest Blower, then at the expectant Amy, then at the gentle Meg, and a hesitant expression appeared on her face. Meg was quite sympathetic toward Anna. She was indeed a poor child, but he was more concerned about Amy's opinion. If she didn't want to come with them, then he definitely wouldn't take Anna in. That wouldn't be good for either of them. However, it appeared that Amy was also very fond of Anna. Little Anna, if you want, you can come with us as well. I'm Cece, and this is Lulu. We really like children too. Cece made her way over to Anna with a genuine smile on her face. Anna hesitated for a long while before mustering her courage and asking Meg, Can I learn how to cook from you? Meg turned to Anna with a hint of surprise on his face. He didn't think that she would want to become a chef. Anna was 2 or 3 years older than Amy, so she was about half a head taller than her. However, even with a small stool, it would still be a little difficult for her to learn how to cook. Blower and the others were also quite surprised. They looked at Anna, then at Meg, wondering what Meg's answer would be. "Of course you can if you really want to learn," Meg replied with a smile. Amy was clearly more interested in magic and food than cooking, so he had the authority to teach 2 people how to cook. Yabamiya was one of them, but he didn't mind teaching Anna as well. "Thank you." Anna's eyes lit up with elation. She turned to Blower and asked, "If I come with you, can I still go to Amy's restaurant to learn how to cook?" Blower looked into Anna's expectant eyes and hesitated momentarily before nodding as he said, "I'll be staying in Chaos City for a while. If you want to learn how to cook, I can bring you here every day." "All right, then I'll come with you. I trust in Grandpa's decision." Anna nodded at Blower. What a pity. Amy was a little disappointed. She then turned to Anna and asked, "Big sister Anna, if you learn how to cook in the future, can you cook for me?" Yes, of course." Anna nodded and said, "All right. In that case, we'll be able to see each other often." A joyful smile reappeared on Amy's face. She held onto Meg's large hand and waved it from side to side as she said, "Father, let's go home." "All right." Meg picked up Amy with a smile. He respected Anna's decision. After all, Joshua had entrusted her to Blower before his death. However, he wasn't in a hurry to leave right away. Instead, he turned to Brantley. The people from the Grey Temple did a simple survey of the elves present. Due to the fact that the incident had taken place near Chaos City, some of the elves present were residents of Chaos City to begin with. As such, the Grey Temple was willing to provide shelter and basic necessities for these elves in Chaos City, as well as ensure their safety. If they wanted to join Chaos City, they could submit an application and become residents of Chaos City after passing the vetting process. No elves made a decision on whether to join Chaos City on the spot, but no elves refused to go to Chaos City either. After being imprisoned in that dark cellar for so long, they needed a safe place to rest, even if it was just a good night's sleep. After everything was settled, Meg carried Amy in his arms and left with Cece, Lulu, and Sally. They rode their bicycles back to the restaurant, and by the time they reached the entrance of the restaurant, Amy had already fallen asleep on the back seat of the bicycle. What a kind and adorable little girl. Meg gently carried Amy down from the bicycle with a smile before placing her on her little bed upstairs. After washing up, he lay down on his bed and closed his eyes as he pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery. "System, I want to learn how to roast beef kebabs." "Boss, our restaurant has been closed for 3 days, and we've been put on the Catering Association's list of dishonest customers. I'm afraid all of our customers have left. What do we do?" The employee looked at Ricky and the empty rotisserie with a concerned expression. "It's all that damned boss's fault. If it weren't for him, our rotisserie wouldn't be in this state. From tomorrow onward, our rotisserie will be able to reopen for business. However, if we want to regain our popularity, we have to think of something else," Ricky said with an enraged expression as he slumped into a large chair. The employee's eyes lit up with anticipation as he turned to Ricky and asked, "Boss, could it be that you've already thought of something? We won't be able to make it onto the Aiden Square Food Competition Rankings board, but didn't you say that their restaurant has been very popular recently? Let's go steal all of that popularity from them." Ricky chuckled coldly. "Steal? How are we supposed to do that, boss?" The employee was perplexed. Chapter 533. Is there something else you need? Outside the Elven embassy, Blower disembarked from his horse-drawn carriage and turned to Sally with a surprised expression.
"Yes."
Sally nodded with a cold expression. "Anna, you can go in with Grandpa Ingve first. Someone will take you to wash up and change into a new set of clothes." Blower held onto Anna's little hand as he got off the carriage with a smile. Ingve took a glance at Sally before making his way into the embassy. "All right." Anna nodded before extending a salute to Sally. She looked up at the majestic embassy before following behind Ingve. "What is it?" Blower asked as he turned to Sally. Sally looked at the smiling Blower. In her eyes, this was a good-for-nothing guy, but he had completely changed her impression of him today. Regardless of whether it was his fearlessness in the face of Olaf or his anxiety during the search for a base, none of that was an act. He wanted to help the elves who were suffering on the Norland continent from the bottom of his heart. Sally was silent for a moment before asking, "Did you already know that something like this was happening? I don't know if you would believe me if I told you that I already knew when I was 10 years old." Blower looked at Sally with a guilty expression as he said, "When I was learning to ride a horse as a child, my horse servant was a lame elf. He was a silent middle-aged elf with a slave brand on his face. At the time, I took great pleasure in teasing him. I would whip him for the slightest thing, or force him to race with me while I was riding a horse. At the time, I didn't think that there was anything wrong with what I was doing. That's what all of the other elven family members think." "What happened after that?" Sally asked with clenched fists. "Later, his other leg was broken because of a small matter, and he was thrown out of the back door. It was raining heavily that day. When I returned home after sneaking out to play, I happened to see him crying helplessly and desperately in the rain. I was a little scared and suddenly felt guilty. Then, I went up to him and asked him why he was crying. He stared at me for a long time before he suddenly calmed down and began to tell me his story. He had once participated in a war between species. Although he was only an ordinary elf warrior, he had personally slain the demons and beastmen who had invaded the Wind Forest. After the war ended, he chose to leave the forest and travel the continent. However, 20 years ago, he was captured by the demons and beastmen. One of his legs was broken, and he became a slave of the Bybili family. The same story happened to most elf slaves. After that, he looked at me calmly and pierced a long stone into his own heart." Blower's voice was very calm, but his tightly clenched fists were a little pale from overexertion. He looked up at Sally and said, "Do you know what the last thing he said to me was?" Sally pursed her lips in silence. "He said that the souls of elves are freedom. Without freedom, elves will die, and the elven race will be extinct." A wry smile appeared on Blower's face. The two of them stood on opposite sides of the street in silence. The moonlight shone down upon them, creating a cold and forlorn atmosphere. After a long silence, Sally turned to Blower and asked, "What's your plan?" "I want to return freedom to the elves. Not only do I want to protect the elves who are roaming the Norland continent, but I also want to protect the elves who are being oppressed in the Wind Forest. I want to protect those noble elves who have lost their souls under the influence of their families. Only in this way can the elven race be saved." Blower looked at Sally with an excited expression. He took a few steps forward and lowered his voice as he said, "Furthermore, if I'm not mistaken, the princess has been doing the same thing for the past few years. Back when she was traveling the continent, she wiped out all of the mercenary squads and held a lofty position in the hearts of the elves outside the forest. After staying in the forest for 3 years, the first thing she did was to kill Schubert and get the queen to abolish the slave law. If we want to completely change the system that has been in place in the Wind Forest for several decades, then all of the major families would definitely oppose us. If the princess were to do it on her own, she would most likely not be able to hold her own. Hence, my plan is to gather as many wandering elves as we can outside the forest, and at the same time, gain as much power as we can within the elven race. When the princess begins to oppose the system of the major families, we'll be able to support her and save the elven race." Blower's breathing accelerated as a hint of fervor appeared in his eyes. Sally's eyes also lit up. She had been selected by Helena as a candidate for the princess, so she had her own judgment and understanding of the situation, as well as Blower's plan. However, what she had experienced today had completely changed her mindset, and she was in complete agreement with Blower's plan. "I agree to maintain a closer relationship with you on the surface in order to garner more attention and support from the Bybili family. However, your 2 brothers are already preparing to inherit the family, so it won't be easy for you to turn the tables on them. Furthermore, you're planning to stay in Chaos City for a long time." Sally looked at Blower and thought for a moment before asking, "Furthermore, the princess was able to gather so much support from all of the wandering elves 3 years ago, as she was powerful enough that she didn't have to worry about being questioned by the people of the Wind Forest. If we want to gain power within the elven race and our family, then we definitely can't side with them openly, and we definitely can't become the dominant force. My two half-brothers are idiots who were born a few years too early. If I wanted to compete with them in the past, they wouldn't even have a chance. Now, all you have to do is nod your head, and I'm confident that I'll be on their side within half a year. Blower shook his head with a nonchalant expression. However, his brows then furrowed as he said, "But you're right. We can only be the mastermind behind the scenes. We have to find a powerful elf who can garner the same level of fanaticism as the princess did back then." Blower's voice abruptly trailed off, and both of their eyes lit up as they called out in unison, "Little boss, Amy!" White light flashed, and Meg entered the familiar kitchen. At this moment, there was a long metal platform placed at the center of the kitchen, upon which a black cow that was close to 5 meters in length was tied up. It was glaring at Meg with its large eyes, and it suddenly began to struggle violently. The metal platform tremored violently, and a loud boom rang out as if it were about to jump off the platform. Chapter 534. This was an ironhide bull, a 4th-tier magic beast. It had gained its name due to its steel-like skin and insane personality. It was extremely violent and aggressive, and it was one of the magic beasts that hunters and mercenaries didn't want to encounter. It would take a very long time to kill an ironhide bull like this, but compared to other 4th-tier magic beasts, ironhide bulls didn't have anything of value aside from their skin and flesh, so they clearly didn't have much in the way of value. However, this ironhide bull was currently tied to the metal platform, and the sturdy metal platform was rattling and clanking as it swayed. Meg's eyelids twitched at the sight of this, and he was a little concerned that this big guy would suddenly break free from its ropes. In such a cramped space, it would be very difficult for him to evade. Selecting and obtaining high-quality ingredients is a basic skill for a chef, and it's also the prerequisite for cooking a perfect dish. As a candidate for the god of cookery, the host should know all of the ingredients that are required in order to select the best parts, the system explained. So you're not telling me to butcher a bull, are you? What kind of chef would do something like that nowadays? That's called butchering. Meg raised an eyebrow and couldn't help but mock the system. Now, the host has to butcher this ironhide bull and obtain the beef required for roast beef kebabs from its carcass. The cow butchering experience bag has already been released, so the host may proceed with the learning process, the system replied in a calm manner, not bothering to argue with Meg. Meg took a deep breath to calm himself down before glancing at the experience bag in his mind, upon which a peculiar expression appeared on his face. The words on the bag read, "Butcher's Cow Butchering Experience Bag. System, if you can even get something like this, I'll have to hand it to you." Meg opened the experience bag, and a series of information flowed into his mind, forcing him to close his eyes to digest the information. When I butchered a bull, all I saw was the bull itself. 3 years later, I didn't see a whole bull. Now, I see it with my eyes, not my eyes. I know when to stop, but my mind desires to continue. Meg still remembered that this was a line from Butcher's Cow Butchering. At the time, he had thought that Zhuangzi was just bragging, but now, he felt like Zhuangzi was being quite reserved. This Chef Ding was really awesome. This was not because Chef Ding was an immortal cultivator, but because he knew the structure of a cow like the back of his hand. The knife moved between the bones without even touching the bones, yet he was able to separate the beef from the bones. This kind of skill was indeed amazing. The experience pack that Meg had received had a detailed introduction to this process. From bleeding the cow to skinning and dismembering the cow, every step was broken down in detail. After merging with Meg's memory, he felt that he had become an experienced butcher. While sighing, Meg could not help but recall Meg Alex's dismantling of the giant dragon in his memory. In his memory, there was a method to dismantle the giant dragon that was similar to how a skilled butcher dissects a cow. In the eyes of Meg Alex, the giant dragon was no longer a giant dragon, but a prey that had countless flaws and could be dismantled from any angle. Regardless of the skill level, Pouting had honed his skills by continuously slaughtering cows for 3 years. On the other hand, Alex had developed his unparalleled dragon-slaying experience by continuously slaying dragons. Even Meg was a little curious about how many dragons he had slain. If I have the time, I should study the cultivation methods and some special things in my memories. I would be a fool if I didn't make use of such a huge treasure. I can't just rely on the system to increase my strength. With that in mind, Meg pulled out a bull-slaying machete from a nearby saber rack before making his way over to the ironhide bull that was tied to the metal platform. This ironhide bull had given him some pressure in the past, but in his eyes, it was now nothing more than a massive bull made up of flesh and bone. All he had to do was separate the bones and flesh and dissect it into different parts of food. The ironhide bull was initially quite enraged, but its eyes had already turned crimson as it stared at Meg. Perhaps it was because it was struck by fear, but it became even more enraged, and the metal platform began to tremor violently. However, Meg's expression remained calm and collected as he slashed his machete across the ironhide bull's neck. Its skin, which was as tough as iron, was easily sliced open by the sharp machete. Meg grabbed onto the bull's horns before pressing its head back onto the metal platform. Blood gushed into the blood trough on the platform, and the frantically struggling ironhide bull soon fell completely still. Meg then easily peeled off the entire bull's hide. Perhaps it was because he had been practicing his swordsmanship for a long time, but Meg's control over his machete was extremely high. Using the experience and memories he had of dissecting bulls, it took him less than half an hour to completely dissect the entire bull. During this process, the machete only came into contact with the bones a few times, and all of the bones were pieced together to form a new bull. Now I have another livelihood skill. If I run out of food in the future, I can go kill bulls. Meg put down his machete and nodded with satisfaction as he looked at the dissected pieces of beef on the metal platform. There was still a long way to go before he could dissect a bull without even looking at it, but Meg was quite pleased to be able to do this on his first try. The ironhide bull was a 4th-tier magic beast, but the beef beneath its hide was extremely soft and springy. The texture of the beef was like a snowflake, and Meg's eyes gradually lit up. Meg was quite a fan of steak in his past life, so he knew all of the famous beef from all over the world like the back of his hand. The expensive Kobe beef from Japan was widely acknowledged to be of the highest quality, the Angus beef from Australia was raised on grains, and the Charolais beef from the Burgundy region of France was quite chewy. However, there was still a significant gap between those beef and the ironhide bull beef before him. Regardless of whether it was the color, texture, the ironhide bull beef was clearly superior. Regardless of how it would taste after being cooked, Meg was very much looking forward to it. That was the most important thing. The beef kebabs were made from beef from the top of the head, which was the meat from the back of the neck. The beef was located on the upper side of the neck, on either side of the rib cage, and in front of the rib cage. The meat from the top of the head was well proportioned, and the snowflake-like fat created a picturesque texture on the bright red beef. Chapter 535. If top-grade beef is the backbone of a kebab, then an exceptional kebab sauce is the soul of a kebab. A top-grade kebab sauce can enhance the taste buds while also elevating the deliciousness of the beef to the extreme. The sauces created by all chefs are one in a million, and they are the key differentiator between kebab and other kebab. After Meg mastered the cow slaughtering technique and was able to slaughter an entire ironhide bull in an extremely short amount of time, the system's voice sounded again. Meg was in agreement with this. On Earth, one could buy beef of the highest quality as long as they had the money. However, the same kebab would taste completely different in the hands of different chefs, as if it had been imprinted with the chef's signature. The key to this was clearly the sauces and seasonings. Making sauces is also a skill. Meg opened the seasoning box beside him to find that the 28-compartment box was almost full. He had a few sauces to choose from in his mind, but on this occasion, the system didn't give him the exact amount of seasonings to use. Instead, it used the words micro, small, medium, and large to describe the amount of seasonings he needed. System, aren't you being a little unprofessional this time? How much is micro? And how much is large? Are you trying to screw me over? Meg raised an eyebrow. Please watch your words, host. The system is not a creature that reproduces normally, so there is no such thing as a father. The system's voice sounded. You can't be so sure about that. System, you've studied Earth's history for so long. Do you know who the father of Apple is? Steve Jobs. What about the father of hybrid rice? Yuan Longping. The father of the atom in China? Qin Sanqiang. Then do you know why they're referred to as the father of XX? Apple was founded and developed by Steve Jobs. Yuan Longping led the development of hybrid rice technology, and Qin Sanqiang made outstanding contributions to China's atom technology. System, you were created because I transmigrated into this world. Using the above three analogies, now, tell me loudly. System, who am I to you? Dad. Host. Please don't confuse the two concepts. These are two completely different things. The system said angrily. Even its voice was trembling slightly. You said it yourself. Meg shrugged as the corner of his lips curled up. As a candidate for the god of cookery, mastering the amount of spices needed to concoct sauces is one of the most basic skills. In order to cultivate the host's ability, the system has made the amount of spices vague. If the host wants to concoct the best quality sauces, the host needs to have a deep understanding of spices and find a wonderful balance between them. This is the skill that a professional chef should have, the system said seriously after calming down its voice. Looks like I'll have to run out of time before I can get out. Meg raised his head and looked at the wall. More than 10 days had passed. Killing a cow had taken so much time. He began to seriously study the various spices that would be needed. Meg didn't refute the system's words because he knew that this was indeed a very good opportunity for him to train. Now, he was still in the stage of learning. Relying on the various top-notch recipes and experience bags provided by the system, he took shortcuts to master a series of top-notch cooking methods. But now, if he was only given ingredients and was asked to create a dish of the same level, he simply couldn't do it. In terms of understanding of ingredients and spices, he might not even be comparable to a housewife who cooked all year round. And now, the system was forcing him to understand and learn the characteristics of these spices and spices. Moreover, he had to use what he learned to the extreme. Facing this kind of challenge, Meg's heart was already burning with a burning fighting spirit. Only by constantly learning and experimenting would he be able to create his own dish sooner or later. At that time, he would be worthy of the title of God of Cookery. There were 3 flavors of soy sauce, spicy sauce, and garlic sauce. 3 completely different ratios. Meg calmed down and slowly understood the characteristics of each of the spices. Then, he began to experiment with the taste of the different spices after they were mixed together. The experience bag gave him a direction. What Meg needed to do was to adjust the ratio and mix the best sauce. Meg tasted the first sauce that he mixed. It was really hard to explain in a few words. Then, he began to enter a cycle of constantly changing the way he mixed it. Although he kept failing, Meg dared to face failure and didn't feel depressed. He seriously thought about the shortcomings of the process and immediately threw himself into the next mix. The first one to receive the system's approval was the sauce-flavored sauce. Meg was able to develop the garlic and spicy flavored sauces in no time. The 3 sauces had 3 completely different flavors and textures, and Meg was already looking forward to how the beef would taste after being coated with these sauces. When the sauces were finished, more than 30 days had passed on the wall. Meg didn't have much time left. He pulled out a knife from the knife holder and cut a piece of beef into 2-centimeter cubes. Then, he carefully mixed the sauce into the beef with his hands. After marinating, he passed a 20-centimeter long bamboo skewer through the middle of the meat. There were 5 pieces of beef on each skewer. The pieces of beef with some traces of blood were covered with snow patterns. He put them aside for later use. There was a long iron grill in the left corner of the kitchen. The charcoal fire was already burning red. Meg reached out to test the temperature and shook his head slightly. After a while, he picked up 5 beef kebabs from the plate and put them on the grill. See, the half-fat and lean beef was placed on the hot iron rack, making a beautiful sound. After brushing a small amount of oil on the beef, the white snowflake-like fat meat on the beef sizzled. Soon, the white snowflake-like fat meat became crystal clear, and the aroma of the beef began to spread in the kitchen. The color of the beef gradually deepened. The oil on the beef's surface burst, and the aroma in the air became more and more intense. When the beef was about 70% cooked, Meg picked up a brush, dipped it in the sauce that he mixed earlier, and spread it evenly on the beef surface. The beef on the grill made a sizzling sound. The sauce was like a catalyst. The aroma of the beef mixed with the sauce's aroma drifted in the air, making people salivate. Chapter 536. The next morning, Meg opened his eyes almost at the exact same time as the alarm clock beside his bed rang. He stared blankly for a moment before turning off the alarm clock. Just a second ago, he had received the system's approval for 3 different flavors of roast beef kebabs in the test field for the god of cookery, and the sun had risen as soon as he opened his eyes. This time, he had spent 100 days in the test field for the god of cookery before learning how to make roast beef kebabs. It was quite clear just how complex the process was, and every single step was a challenge for him. However, during these 100 days, Meg had also learned many things. He had improved his cooking skills, his understanding of spices and condiments, and his control of heat. He had mastered all of these aspects to the extreme, and it could be said that he had achieved many of his goals. I should be able to make a delicious roast beef kebab for Amy this morning as a surprise, right? Meg got up from the bed. Even though his body had been resting this entire time in the test field for the god of cookery, cooking roast beef kebabs for over 100 days in a row was still quite exhausting. He felt as if his mind would be filled with roast beef kebabs as soon as he closed his eyes. Ding! New mission. Hunt down a mature ironhide bull within 24 hours and obtain a portion of the bull's upper brain to be used as an ingredient for your first roast beef kebabs on the Norland continent. Punishment for mission failure. Decrease of 1 strength point. Reward for mission success. All ingredients and kitchenware required for roast beef kebabs will be granted. Holy fuck. You're doing this again, system? How annoying. Now people are going to say that you don't have any fun missions, and that you're giving me repetitive missions with no creativity at all. Is this what a fucking system should do? Furthermore, as a god of cookery cultivation system, you don't let your chef cook at home. Instead, you send him out to hunt every day, catching pigs and cows. Can't you let me be a handsome man who cooks quietly? Mag complained with a roll of his eyes. The system was silent for a moment before replying. If the host can complete the mission within 12 hours, the reward will be upgraded. Aside from the ingredients and kitchenware required for roast beef kebabs, you'll also receive 0.5 strength point and a mooncake recipe. That's right. That's our dear and adorable system. Only our system can come up with such a fresh and adorable mission. Meg immediately got up from the bed and said while changing his clothes. His face wasn't red at all. What was a physical fitness point? It was light. That was the hope of humanity's progress. That was 250,000 gold coins. Of course, the last point was the most important. Going out and catching a bronze-skinned wild bull would give him 0.5 vitality points as a reward. To Meg, who was crazily trying to level up, this was simply too good to be true. What was there to be tired of? Catching a bronze-skinned wild bull was equivalent to earning. Although the system had yet to announce the price of the next strength point, with the system's nature, the previous strength point was already sold for 50,000 gold coins. It was impossible to buy this strength point from him without at least 100,000 gold coins. Furthermore, in addition to the physical fitness points, the system had also given him a mooncake recipe. He had promised Amy that he would make mooncakes for her on the night of the full moon tomorrow to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival. Now, everything was ready. As soon as the strength point mission was announced, Meg felt completely awake. He looked at Amy, who was lying on the bed beside him. The system solemnly warns the host that this mission requires the host to complete it alone. It is strictly prohibited to bring along any unconventional weapons, including your daughter. The system's solemn voice sounded. System, I would like to raise a serious objection to your words. Amy is the apple of my eye. She is my sweet little sweetheart. How can you describe her as an unconventional weapon? You are seriously misinterpreting my fatherly love. You are viciously harming my character and dignity. Therefore, in order to express my objection, I have decided to bring her along for an autumn outing, Meg said sternly. A series of ellipses silently floated past, full of the system's complex feelings. Meg whistled as he went downstairs. First, he made 2 servings of Yangzhou fried rice. Then, he went upstairs to wake Amy up and announced to her that he would be skipping school today to go on an autumn outing. Father, can we really skip school today and go on an autumn outing? Amy rubbed her sleepy eyes as she looked at Meg in surprise. Yes. Aside from the autumn outing, we have to go out to gather materials and catch a big cow. When we come back, Father will make delicious roast beef kebabs for you. Meg nodded with a smile. He found a simple pinkish-blue floral dress from the wardrobe and changed into it for Amy before taking her downstairs. Roast beef kebabs? Is that a lot of roast meat? Amy looked at Meg expectantly. Yes, Amy can eat as much as she wants. Meg nodded seriously and flashed a bright smile at Amy. Father, you are the best. Amy hugged Meg's leg happily. Then, she quickly picked up Ugly Duckling, which was still lazing around in bed, and shook it gently. Ugly Duckling, if you don't get up now, we're going to leave you alone at home. Ugly Duckling, which was still pretending to be asleep, immediately opened its eyes and looked at Amy with a hint of panic in its eyes. It shook its head and meowed. Then let's go together. Meg looked at Ugly Duckling with a smile. When they went out last night, Ugly Duckling was already asleep, and it wasn't convenient to carry it, so they left it at home to sleep. However, when they came back, this little guy was lying in front of the floor-to-ceiling window downstairs, looking out with an extremely aggrieved expression. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling immediately cried happily. All right, then I'll take you, but you have to walk on your own later. You're not a baby anymore. Amy spoke to the aggrieved Ugly Duckling in her arms with a serious expression. She then spread open her arms toward Meg and said, Father, I want to carry you. All right, Princess Amy. Meg turned around with a smile and extended his broad shoulders toward Amy. Thank you. Amy put down Ugly Duckling and bent her knees slightly before lying down on Meg's back with an elated smile. She looped her arms around his neck and smiled as she said, Let's go. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling was standing on the bed with an urgent look on its face. Meg then scooped it up in his arms and carried Amy downstairs. After breakfast, Meg took out the leave request that he had written last time and pasted it on the door. While there were still no customers outside the restaurant, he rode his bicycle toward the mercenary union with Amy and Ugly Duckling. He had to find out where Ironhide Bulls could be found near Chaos City. No way. Mr. Mac went out to gather ingredients again. Doesn't that mean I won't be able to eat delicious savory tofu pudding today? Outside Amy's, all of the customers heaved forlorn sighs upon seeing the leave request on the door. Chapter 537. Ricky finally squeezed his way to the front of the line, and his entire body was trembling with rage at the sight of the leave slip hanging on the door. He had finally woken up early this morning to deliver the letter of challenge, but he didn't expect to receive a leave of absence. Therefore, the first thought that came to his mind was that Mag didn't dare to accept the challenge and found an excuse to close his shop and lie low. He had absolute confidence in his roast meat. His rotisserie had been passed down for 3 generations in his family, and it was a well-known brand in Chaos City. Even if there weren't any rigged votes, his rotisserie would still be able to make it into the top 50 on the Aiden Square Food Competition Rankings board. Furthermore, he had come to Mamie's with such confidence, and he had prepared a trump card specifically to deal with Meg. However, he didn't think that his opponent would disappear before he could even unleash his fist. This was driving him crazy. Isn't that the owner of Ricky's Rotisserie? I remember that during the Aiden Square Food Competition last month, he was constantly targeting Mamie's and accusing Mr. Mac of rigging the rankings board. In the end, The Catering Association announced that Ricky's rotisserie was the one that rigged the rankings board, and he was blacklisted by the Aiden Square Food Competition Rankings Board. What's he doing here today? Harrison recognized Ricky with a perplexed look on his face. Many customers also turned to Ricky in unison upon hearing that. They were all wondering why this owner of Mamie's would dare to come here. Was he here to cause trouble again? I'm here today to challenge the owner of this restaurant. I want to have a fair cooking competition with him and see who's the king of roast meat in the Aiden Square. Ricky's face flushed red when he sensed the gazes and whispers directed at him. He raised his right hand high and said loudly, "Let's go." Ricky's rotisserie. Ricky's rotisserie. The employee yelled with his hand raised high into the air, echoing Ricky's declaration of challenge in a rather feeble manner. Mamie's doesn't sell roast meat, does it? Mr. Mack might not be an expert in roast meat, and he's never claimed to be the king of roast meat. Is there something wrong with this guy's head? Yeah, isn't it too shameless to challenge Mr. Mack with a dish that he's best at? That's not necessarily true. Mr. Mack is a genius. I think there's nothing in this world that he can't cook. Even if it's barbecued meat, Mr. Mack's cooking will definitely be the best. The guests looked at Ricky and began to discuss among themselves. Some looked down on him, while others were full of confidence in Meg. I'll be back at noon today. I'd like to see how long that coward is going to hide, and whether he dares to accept my challenge. Ricky harumphed coldly before taking a disdainful glance at the customers at the entrance of the restaurant before slowly strolling away. At this moment, Meg had just emerged from the guild hall with Amy and Ugly Duckling. He was holding a map, and after examining it carefully for a while, he pulled out his bicycle from an alley and rode toward the southern city gate with the two little ones. He had obtained a map of the area where ironhide bulls often roamed. However, compared to the copper boar from last time, ironhide bulls were clearly more mischievous. As such, he would have to venture deeper into the forest to find them. Even though it was a little troublesome, Mag was still willing to give it a try in the face of the temptation of the strength point and mooncake recipe. After exiting the city, Meg stowed his bicycle away. The road in the northern part of the city had been created by the mercenaries, so it was full of bumps and hollows, making it unsuitable for bicycles. Meg wanted to get an off-road bicycle from the system, but after hearing the system's exorbitant price, he decided to go with the most environmentally friendly method of travel, walking. The mercenaries poured out of the city gate. There were forest trolls over 5 meters tall, and their legs were as thick as tree trunks. There were abyssal demons riding on porcupine battle boars. There were goblins in neat formations, and giant dragons glided across the sky as they made their way into the wilderness. Amy sat on Meg's shoulder and looked at the group with excitement in her eyes as she asked, "Father, are we mercenaries as well?" "That's right. We went to the Mercenary Guild to accept a mission, so of course we're mercenaries as well." Meg nodded with a smile. His heart rate had accelerated slightly, and he felt as if a sense of wildness was growing in his heart. A knight rode past Meg on a horse and said in a loud voice, "Hey, mercenaries don't take little girls into the wilderness." His words immediately drew raucous laughter from the surrounding mercenaries, and many of them turned to Meg. They were all curious as to why a man who didn't even have a horse would take a little half-elf girl into the wilderness. Furthermore, aside from the strange backpack on his back, there was only a strange-looking saber hanging from his waist. He didn't look like a professional mercenary at all. Instead, he looked more like a father taking his daughter out for an autumn outing. Meg paid no heed to the mocking gazes directed at him by the mercenaries. That was just how mercenaries were. How could they know that his backpack was filled with all types of spices and tools that could be used to enjoy the most delicious food in the wilderness? Furthermore, the saber hanging from his waist was the most powerful and lethal weapon against ironhide bulls, the bull-slaying saber. My father is the most powerful mercenary in the world. He's the most powerful knight. Meg didn't care, but Amy wasn't having any of it. All of the mercenaries burst into laughter at the sight of the serious expression on Amy's little face. "Hey, where are you guys going?" Right at this moment, A large, open horse-drawn carriage pulled by 3 unicorns stopped beside Meg, and a woman stood on the shaft of the carriage as she looked at Meg with a question. Meg turned to discover a beautiful woman with a head of long red hair. The morning sun cast a pink hue over her wheat-colored skin, and her red and black leather armor was unable to conceal her voluptuous breasts. Her leather shorts that were almost all the way down to her thighs further accentuated her toned and slender legs. She had a folding boomerang that was over a meter in length strapped behind her back, and she was appraising Meg and Amy with a curious expression in her beautiful brown eyes, as if she were a wild cheetah. There were 7 mercenaries sitting behind her horse-drawn carriage, among which were an orc, a demon, a human, and even an elf. This was clearly a small mercenary group. A huntress. That was the first thought that flashed through Meg's mind. However, in contrast with the mocking mercenaries, Meg didn't see any disdain in her eyes. He hesitated momentarily before replying, "We're going to the illusionary mist valley." Chapter 538. You're also going to the illusionary mist valley? Meg was also quite surprised to see this huntress with such a voluptuous figure. Her healthy, wheat-colored skin couldn't hide her gorgeous features, and she gave off a sense of explosive power. Judging from her tone, it seemed that their target was most likely the Ironhide Bulls as well. All of the mercenaries on the horse-drawn carriage were also appraising Mag and his daughter. They didn't know why their captain had suddenly stopped. Furthermore, this pair of father and daughter didn't appear to be out hunting for prey at all. Why would they run into the illusionary mist valley on foot? What kind of nonsense was that? "Hello, beautiful big sister huntress." Amy greeted Chi Will in a polite manner, and her eyes lit up at the sight of Chi Will. "What a beautiful big sister." "That's right. We've accepted a mission to capture an Ironhide Bull." Chi Will nodded before turning to Amy and said, "Hello, little girl." Chi Will's eyes also lit up at the sight of Amy. What an adorable little girl. She had actually stopped the horse-drawn carriage precisely because of this little girl sitting on Meg's back. This made her recall some heartwarming memories. "What a coincidence. Our target is also the Ironhide Bull," Meg said as he looked at Chi Will. This little girl was quite straightforward, and she wasn't trying to hide anything at all. Ironhide Bull? Peculiar expressions immediately appeared on the faces of the mercenaries on the carriage as they appraised Meg from head to toe. This was an ordinary-looking human. He didn't have a long sword strapped to his waist, nor did he look like a knight. He wasn't wearing a magician's robe, nor was he holding a wand. Yet, this guy was saying that he was going to hunt for an Ironhide Bull with a little half-elf girl on his back? One had to realize that their mission was to capture an Ironhide Bull, yet a customer had come to them and offered them a higher price than usual. This was why they were willing to take the risk. Ignorant. A young elf wearing a white mage robe sitting alone in a corner glanced at Meg and pursed his lips. He then turned his gaze to Chi Will with undisguised adoration in his eyes. Chi Will's gaze shifted to Meg. He narrowed his eyes and looked into his eyes. Meg also looked into Chi Will's eyes with a calm expression. They were here to find the Ironhide Bulls anyway, so there was no need for them to feel guilty at all. If you walk to the Miwu Valley, it will take at least half a day. If you don't feel crowded, you can get in the car. We will take you to the Miwu Valley on the way. Chi Will looked at Meg and said. It had been a long time since he had seen someone with such clear eyes. His father had once said that a person with such clear eyes was not a bad person, because that was the window to a person's soul. Although Miwu Valley was dangerous, this was his choice. Moreover, from his gaze, it was clear that he had no intention of changing his mind, so she respected his choice. "Are we taking them with us?" Everyone else turned to Chi Will with a hint of surprise in their eyes. Their mercenary group had never gone on missions with other mercenaries, especially when they had the same goal. "Chi Will, I don't think that's a good idea. The Ironhide Bulls are very dangerous targets, and even our Rose mercenary squad doesn't have absolute confidence in being able to capture them. If we take 2 burdens with us, we'll have to divert some of our attention to protect them during battle. That's not a good idea for us." The elf stood up and looked at Chi Will. He then turned to Meg and said in a cold voice also, if some people have any self-awareness, they should know what they can and can't do. The other mercenaries also nodded upon hearing this. Evan's words weren't very pleasant to hear, but they weren't completely unreasonable. Mercenaries lived their lives on the line every day, and every mission was chosen based on the strength of the mercenary group. If they had to divert their attention to protect two people who couldn't protect themselves, then the mission could fail. In fact, some of the members might even have to pay a heavy price. We're not burdens. Amy's father is super powerful. Amy turned to Evan with an indignant expression. Even though they were all elves, for some reason, Big Sister Aisha and Big Brother Blower looked a lot more comfortable than this guy. Evan, don't judge someone you don't know. A hint of displeasure flashed through Chawil's eyes as he turned to Evan. As the only battle magic caster in the mercenary group, and an ice magic caster who was close to becoming an intermediate magic caster, Evan's combat prowess was second only to hers. Furthermore, ever since he joined the mercenary group 3 months ago, the mercenary group had indeed become a lot more powerful. He had played a vital role in many of their missions, and the mercenary group had also been able to choose missions with higher rewards. However, Chiwil knew why Evan had chosen their Rose mercenary squad instead of a more powerful mercenary group. He had expressed his love for her on many occasions, only to be rejected by her. He wasn't a very magnanimous person, and regardless of whether her husband was powerful or not, he was at least a kind and magnanimous person. Chiwil, Evan's brows furrowed. He didn't think that Chiwil would speak to him like this for a guy he had only just met. Meg looked at Chiwil with a smile as he cut off Evan and said, if you can hitch a ride with me, then I'd be happy to oblige. If it took half a day to get to the illusionary Mist Valley, it would be quite a difficult journey, and even if he found the Ironhide Bull, it would be quite troublesome to get it back. Even if he returned empty-handed, he would have to wait until midnight before he could get back to Chaos City. The wilderness at night was much more dangerous than it already was. It was clearly a good idea to hitch a ride with them. This small mercenary group clearly wasn't very powerful, and the fact that the Ironhide Bull was their target indicated that the average power level of these mercenaries was below the 4th tier. However, they should be able to protect themselves in the wilderness. As for that elf who had developed an inexplicable sense of hostility toward him, he didn't pay him any heed. He had seen many people who had lost their minds over women in his past life, and he had 1,000 different ways to deal with them. Let's get on the carriage. Seeing as we have the same target, we'll split up after we reach the illusionary Mist Valley. Chiwil nodded as he looked at Meg. Meg's straightforward attitude made him seem like a true mercenary. However, she also had to consider the feelings of her mercenary group members. As the group leader, she knew what she should do and what she shouldn't do. Thank you. Meg smiled as he carried Amy onto the horse-drawn carriage. He then climbed onto the horse-drawn carriage himself and sat down in a corner with Amy on his lap. Meanwhile, Ugly Duckling was in Amy's arms. Let's continue. Chiwil turned around and spoke to the thin mercenary who was driving the horse-drawn carriage. The horse-drawn carriage continued along the bumpy path. Evan, who was sitting in the opposite corner of the carriage, looked at Meg with a peculiar expression and said, I didn't think there would be someone as shameless as you in this world. Chapter 539. The playful expression on Evan's face instantly froze. His eyebrows trembled slightly as if he was trying to suppress his emotions. If he were to get angry at a little girl, it would be even more difficult to capture Chawil's heart. During this period of time, he had also somewhat figured out some of Chawil's preferences. All the mercenaries immediately roared with laughter. They didn't have much of a good impression of Evan, who thought highly of himself and always had a smug expression. Since Chiwil had already allowed Meg and his daughter to board the carriage, and they would be separated once they reached the illusionary Mist Valley, they naturally didn't have any hostility towards him. Furthermore, this little girl was indeed adorable. She had the ability to choke Evan to death with a single sentence. Little girl, do you think you can speak to Master Evan like that? He's a powerful 3rd-tier ice magic caster, and he's also a spatial magic caster. I demand that you apologize to Master Evan immediately. At this moment, a young girl sitting not far away from Evan suddenly stood up and looked angrily at Amy. Meg looked up. The young girl was about 17 or 18 years old. She was wearing a blue and white dress. Her appearance was ordinary, and there was a white magic wand hanging from her waist. She looked like a magic caster, but she didn't even wear a magic caster's robe, so she should be a first-tier magic caster. Seeing her angrily defending Evan, as if the most important person to her had been insulted, Meg thought of a phrase, brainless fan. Look, big sister, your breasts are so small. Amy looked at Eva with a surprised expression. She even pointed at her chest with her little finger and said, "It's like there's nothing there." Everyone's gaze followed Amy's little finger. Sure enough, it was flat as if it had been washed clean. They couldn't help but nod in agreement. You. Eva's expression suddenly changed. She immediately shrank back into her seat and hugged her knees with both hands, trying to cover her breasts. Her face was as red as a monkey's butt. She stared at Amy as if she wanted to eat both of them. Little brother, are you also a mercenary? Are you a knight or a magician? Dennis, the Minotaur demon sitting beside Mag, asked with a hearty smile. Everyone else also turned to Mag with a curious expression upon hearing that. Mag's equipment was simply too strange, and they couldn't quite figure out what he was doing. Even Chiwell turned to look at Meg. He wanted to know why he was so confident and dared to bring his daughter into the wilderness. Strength was the only way to dote on her. If he wasn't strong enough, then it would be completely irresponsible. Meg looked at everyone's curious eyes and said calmly, "Actually, I'm a chef." Everyone was stunned. Looking at Meg, they felt as if they had misheard something. "My father's cooking is super delicious," Amy chimed in with a proud expression on her little face. Chef? Then why are you looking for an iron hide bowl?" Dennis stared at Meg with wide eyes. He had thought that he had misheard, but judging from the proud tone in Amy's voice, it appeared that he hadn't misheard. However, he was still looking at Meg with a surprised expression. All of the other mercenaries also wore similar expressions. In fact, they even felt that this was a little absurd. They were a group of battle-hardened mercenaries, yet they were sitting in the same carriage as a chef. Furthermore, they were heading toward the same destination. A chef? Chiwell looked at Meg with slightly furrowed brows. He had thought that Meg was a rational and wise man. But if he really was just a chef who had brought his daughter into this perilous wilderness, then he definitely wouldn't be a good father. Or perhaps he didn't even know what a fourth-tier magic beast entailed. The restaurant is preparing to release a new dish that requires ironhide bull meat, so I went out to procure the ingredients. Meg replied with an honest expression. A mercenary who didn't know how to cook wasn't a good chef. Furthermore, in terms of aptitude, he had the dragon-slaying tutorial that Meg Alex had left behind in his mind. It wasn't that he was looking down on everyone present, but they were all trash when it came to hunting. What a strange way of thinking. But do you know that an ironhide bull is a fourth-tier magic beast? Even I don't dare to face that big guy head-on. When it runs, it can easily crash through trees that are as thick as 3 or 4 people's arms. Its skin is as tough as steel, and even a third-tier knight's full-force sword strike can only leave a shallow wound on its body. You don't even have a sword. Are you planning to engage it in a melee battle? Scott asked as he looked at Meg with a long sword hanging from his waist. He was beginning to feel that this guy didn't seem to understand what he was going to face in the illusionary Mist Valley. I actually have a weapon with me. It's a bull-slaying knife. Meg pointed at the bull-slaying knife in a black scabbard hanging from his waist. All of the mercenaries' expressions became even more peculiar as they stared at Meg as if he were a freak. They had been mercenaries for half of their lives, but they had never heard of a mercenary bringing a bull-slaying knife with him on a mission. Chiwell was also feeling a little conflicted. He was wondering if he should toss this clueless guy away and tell him to hurry back to Chaos City with his daughter. What was a chef doing here? A chef like you dares to come to the wilderness to seek death? Let me see what your bull-slaying knife looks like. Let me see if it can cut through trees. Evan looked at Meg with a mocking expression before extending his right hand toward Meg. Chapter 540. Ding! The bull-slaying knife was nailed to the wooden plank right in the middle of Evan's crotch, along with his pants and magician's robe. The hilt of the knife was trembling slightly, and the cold gleam of the blade made all of the men present subconsciously clamp their legs together. The pale-faced Evan felt a chill run down his crotch. In that instant, he thought he was going to bid farewell to his identity as a male elf. The sharp blade was less than an inch away from his crotch, and his heart almost stopped beating. It was clearly just an ordinary bull-slaying knife, but it seemed to be imbued with a needle-like aura. Every time the handle of the knife swayed slightly, he felt as if his heart and nerves were under pressure. He pressed his hands against the side of the carriage and jumped up, trying to get as far away from that terrifying knife as possible. Rip! The crisp sound of cloth being torn rang out. The bull-slaying knife that was still nailed to the wooden plank easily parted his pants down the middle, creating a long gash from his crotch. Evan's expression changed, and he hurriedly clamped his legs together and pulled his magician's robe and pants tighter. His face immediately flushed red, and he was as embarrassed as a monkey that had been caught stealing food. His previous arrogance had completely disappeared. The mercenaries all had strange expressions on their faces upon seeing this. They wanted to laugh, but they had to hold it in. Some of them had already started pinching their own thighs. Looks like he's not just a simple chef. Chiwell glanced at Meg with a hint of surprise, and then silently turned his head away with a smile on his face. Meg's flick of his finger had completely changed the trajectory of the bull-slaying knife. Even though he didn't know if it was a coincidence or if he had done it on purpose, it was enough to teach Evan a lesson. Eva looked at Evan, who was clamping his legs together, and her face immediately blushed. She hurriedly got up and rummaged through her bag as she said, "Don't worry, Magician Evan. I brought a dress. I'll get it for you right away. My pants are torn, and I'm a male elf wearing a flowery dress, and I'm embarrassed," Amy sang in a mellow voice with a joyful smile on her face. Ha ha ha. The mercenaries, who were holding back their laughter, couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into laughter. This little girl was really too cute, and her little mouth was a little too powerful. Evan's face turned even redder. He threw away the floral dress that Eva handed to him and said angrily, "I'm not going to wear this kind of thing." But Eva looked at the floral dress that was blown away by the wind and hung on the tree behind. Tears were already welling up in her eyes. That was her favorite dress. "Shut up," Evan scolded coldly. His voice was already somewhat hysterical. He had never experienced such humiliation before. Moreover, it was in front of the girl he liked. Now, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. Eva looked at Evan and silently returned to her seat. Tears slowly slid down her cheeks and dripped onto the ground. She glanced at Meg and Amy from the corner of her eyes, and her eyes were full of resentment. It was these two guys who made the situation like this, and it was because of them that Magician Evan spoke to her like this. Meg stood up and pulled out the bull-slaying knife from the wooden plank and looked at Evan with a calm expression as he said, "Next time, you have to hold the knife steady. Otherwise, you won't be so lucky every time." He wasn't an emotionless clay Buddha, and there was a limit to how magnanimous he could be. If someone wanted to take advantage of him, then he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. This time, the knife was only nailed to his pants. If they continued to be naughty, then the next time, his aim wouldn't be off. And next time, you won't even have a dress, Amy added with a serious expression. Oomph. Evan was so angry that his whole body trembled. In the end, he snorted coldly and sat down again. He was the one who snatched the knife first and almost cut himself. Even if his teeth were broken, he could only swallow it. Just now, he had already embarrassed himself enough. If he continued to argue, then his position in Chiwell's heart would probably drop again. He glanced at the conspicuous knife wound on the wooden plank and shifted his legs to the side again. Furthermore, that flick of Mag's finger had also struck him with a sense of wariness. Even though his spatial magic was only at the first tier, he was still able to alter the trajectory of an object in flight. However, he was unable to alter the trajectory of that saber that was hurtling toward him in the slightest. All of the mercenaries were also looking at Mag with a different light in their eyes. They had initially thought that Mag was a strange chef, but his straightforward personality and straightforward way of doing things made him more like a true knight. As such, they felt that he was more worthy of being friends with than Evan. Hello, I'm Dennis. I'm responsible for charging and acting as a meat shield in the Rose mercenary group, the Minotaur demon said with a smile as he looked at Meg. I'm Skull. I'm only responsible for charging, the strong orc sitting next to Dennis said with a silly smile. I'm Scott. I'm usually responsible for bringing up the rear, the stocky human knight sitting diagonally opposite smiled. I'm Sam. I'm mainly responsible for setting up traps, a middle-aged man introduced himself. I'm Sydney. You can also call me Monkey. Other than driving the cart, I'm also responsible for scouting. The skinny young man driving the cart turned around and smiled at Meg, revealing a row of neat white teeth. I'm Chi-Will. I'm the leader of the Rose mercenary group, Chi-Will said as he looked at Meg. Evan turned his face away, the veins on his forehead throbbing as he tried to suppress his anger. Eva buried her head between her legs, clearly not wanting to introduce herself. I'm Meg. I'm the owner of Amy's. This is my daughter, Amy, Meg said with a smile. For mercenaries, this kind of introduction meant acceptance. Although he had a bit of an argument with the elf, he still had a good impression of these mercenaries. I didn't expect you to be not only a chef, but also a boss. If that's the case, the food you make must be delicious, right? Can you make us a good meal for lunch today? Sydney looked at Meg expectantly. The other mercenaries also looked at Meg with sparkling eyes. It's not bad. If you want to eat, you can leave lunch to me. But I'll need you to help me with the ingredients. Meg nodded. He had used lunch in exchange for a free ride. This favor was repaid. They didn't owe each other anything. That's for sure. When it comes to hunting, we're all veterans, Monkey said with a smile. The other mercenaries also laughed. The cart sped forward. The unicorn was a level 2 magical beast. It had a gentle personality, and its endurance and speed were much better than ordinary horses. Even on this bumpy road, it could maintain a decent speed. Along the way, Meg and the other mercenaries talked and laughed. Amy interjected from time to time, causing a burst of laughter. Except for the sulking couple in the corner, the atmosphere was very harmonious. Stop. Prepare for battle. Chapter 541. The horse-drawn carriage came to a halt in a dense forest filled with towering trees. All of the mercenaries on the horse-drawn carriage immediately sprang into action. The Minotaur demon Dennis and Orc Skull got off the carriage and stood at the very front with their weapons raised. Scott and Sam also got off the carriage and stood at the back of the carriage, surveying their surroundings with wary expressions. Sydney the monkey dashed through the trees like a real monkey, disappearing from view in the blink of an eye. Evan was still sitting in the horse-drawn carriage with his wand in his hand as he surveyed his surroundings. Eva also remained in her seat, but she reflexively inched closer to Evan. Meg held Amy tightly in his arms with his right hand resting on his bull-slaying saber. Carrying a longsword would make others think that he was hiding something, so he decided to switch to a bull-slaying saber for now. He looked around with a curious expression, but didn't see anything worthy of a fight. As such, he couldn't help but wonder why Chi-Will had suddenly stopped with such a serious expression on his face. Amy's eyes were also filled with curiosity. This was the first time she had been with a mercenary squad, and she was feeling a little excited that she was about to experience her first battle. Ugly Duckling, who had been dozing off in Amy's arms this entire time, suddenly opened its eyes wide. Its ears perked up, and it stuck its neck out to sniff carefully. It then looked around at the surrounding forest in alarm, as if it had discovered something of interest. "What's that, leader?" Dennis looked around, but didn't discover anything suspicious, so he turned to Chi-Will with a question. The other mercenaries were also rather perplexed, but there was no doubt in their eyes. They had absolute trust in Chi-Will. It's an adult purple golden mink. We're quite lucky. If we can catch this little guy today, our rewards won't be any less than those of the Ironhide Bulls, Chi-Will said with a smile. A purple golden mink. All of the mercenaries were elated to hear this. I didn't think we'd encounter a purple golden mink here. I heard someone offered 500 gold coins for a purple golden mink fur, and it's even more expensive than gold. We sure are lucky today. Dennis rubbed his hands together in an excited manner. The purple golden mink is very cunning and cowardly, and it's extremely fast as well. It won't be easy for us to capture it in this forest. We can only get Monkey to lead it toward us first, then we can capture it. We only have one chance, and if we fail, it won't fall for our trap again. The smile on Chawil's face faded, and a serious expression appeared on his face. He stood on the shaft of the carriage and surveyed his surroundings before pointing at the intersection between two mounds of dirt as he said, "Let's wait there. Sam, set up your traps, and everyone else, spread out." She then swung herself onto a nearby tree and lashed out with her whip over and over again, using it to quickly traverse through the forest. Big Sister Chiwil is so awesome, Amy exclaimed with elation in her eyes. She really is. Meg looked at Chiwil as she swung through the trees, and he couldn't help but recall Lara from Tomb Raider. "Father, what's a purple golden mink?" Amy turned to Meg with a curious expression. "It's a type of large mouse with purplish golden fur," Meg explained with a smile. "A large mouse?" Amy's eyes lit up, and she looked down at Ugly Duckling as she said, "Ugly Duckling, it's a mouse. Can you catch it?" "Heh, what do you mean by a large mouse?" "The purple golden mink is a second-tier magic beast. There's no way a little kitten would be able to catch it," Eva scoffed at Ugly Duckling, which was only slightly larger than a palm in Amy's arms. "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling took a glance at Eva, seemingly a little displeased with her words as it extended its little pink paw in a threatening manner. "You're wrong, Big Sister Flatchest. Ugly Duckling isn't a kitten. It's a duckling, and it's most likely a duckling that can catch mice." Amy shook her head with a serious expression. "Oomph. If even it can catch a purple golden mink, then I'll eat it raw." Eva's body trembled with rage upon hearing Amy's words, and she harumphed coldly as she turned away. "It's here." A short and long whistle sounded from afar. A monkey-like figure was running through the trees at high speed. In front of him, there was a purple gold figure jumping on the tree trunk at an even faster speed. It was almost impossible to see the figure clearly. One could only see a purple gold shadow. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.